Chapter 930. This was the second time they had confronted the foreign races. The first time was when Renbachian and the Empress used nuclear annihilation in the 60,000 mountains to wipe out a few herdsmen. But this time, although the human martial artists suffered fewer casualties than the foreign races, it was a complete and utter defeat, which made everyone who participated sober up. The foreign races were very strong. This was the case even when the human side had the absolute advantage. If the two sides were to face each other head-on, the casualties would be even greater. The Empress ordered with a gloomy face, "Withdraw everyone." Renbachian's eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. Although this path had to be opened, it wasn't the right time yet. Unless Li Fu was sent to restrain the foreign experts, but Li Fu was still useful at the moment. After all, Renbachian was still waiting for Li Fu to be the scapegoat. If Su Wuming suddenly came, it would be too risky since he was a super expert from 100 years ago and the Empress was pregnant. Whether it was the Empress or the ball in her stomach, he couldn't accept any problems. Even if it was a ball, it was the ball that he and the Empress gave birth to. Putting the matter of the ball aside, Renbachian had to prepare something to open up the path after everyone had recuperated. Putting the nuclear bomb aside, the effects of nuclear radiation hadn't yet manifested. The situation in the 60,000 mountains was complicated, and it was easy for unexpected situations to occur. He still needed to observe for a period of time. Renbachian was very interested in sonic weapons and weather weapons. Manipulating the weather to attack from thousands of kilometers away was like using technology to achieve the magic of the immortals in novels. Although the ancient race Kismet Heaven warriors had been valiant in the face of the foreign races, the casualties they had suffered had been heart-wrenching. Originally, Renbachian wasn't going to develop gunpowder weapons. After all, with such weapons, the role of an individual's ability would be greatly reduced. 10 to 10 years was still manageable, but after a few decades, gunpowder weapons would spread to other countries sooner or later. At that time, the Aboriginals would be at a disadvantage. However, the situation had changed at this time. The casualties of the Kismet Heaven Aboriginal warriors made him feel a little distressed. More than 30 people had died and 100 were seriously injured in just a village of 300 people. It was necessary to use more advanced weapons to enhance their combat capabilities. In Renbachian's mind, this kind of weapon was similar to the Gatling gun. It could cover the sky and drown the enemy with a rain of bullets. As long as there were enough of them, they could even pose a threat to a Cardinal Heaven expert. As for the weight of the machine guns and ammunition boxes, the Aboriginals didn't need to worry about this. Not long after the Empress gave the order, Li Yuanzhu met up with everyone who had returned. In fact, even before she arrived, she already knew about the heavy casualties. In her heart, she was secretly shocked by the combat power of those foreign races. This time, when she met up with everyone, she also saw a few captives brought back by everyone. There was a spirit will expert and a few earth will experts from the Negu race. After seeing these foreign races and this battle, these experts no longer had any doubts. Along the way, they were seriously considering Renbachian's method of killing people. Based on the current situation, the human race might not be able to win even if they gathered all their forces to fight against the strange races. If they split their forces, it would be suicide. Of course, there was another option, which was to give up crossing the barrier of the 60,000 mountains. However, this option was not within everyone's range of options. It had to be said that his nuclear bomb gave them great confidence. With such a destructive weapon in hand, the humans might be able to win this battle. Otherwise, it was hard to say how they would choose. Just like Li Fu and Su Wuming back then. However, at this time, Renbachian had already shifted his gaze to other weapons. 5 months later, the Empress was 16.5 months pregnant. She still hadn't given birth, but her belly was a little bigger. Now, even if she covered it with clothes, some traces could still be seen. This made Rinpoche more and more focused on figuring out what was inside the ball in the Empress's belly. In any case, it wasn't Pikachu. During this period, Rinpoche went back to the Messier 87 department to learn about the weather weapon. After asking for instructions, this information wasn't kept secret from him. The domestic weather weapon was still being developed. Although there were some results, it was still some distance from actual combat. At present, the main directions included sound waves, typhoons, tornadoes, earthquakes, hail, and rapid cooling. In fact, this was also the main direction of research in various countries. If the research went smoothly, Rinpoche would be able to see results in another 5 to 10 years. Dayo had only been in existence for a little more than 3 years. However, the current results were some large equipment that Rinpoche couldn't bring back to Dayo with his strength of more than 1,000 kilograms. It would take longer for them to be miniaturized. In any case, Rinpoche finally had a clear idea of what was going on. In addition, the diesel engine had also been developed, and the scholars from Earth had played a great role. There were now 23 scholars, including several physicists, chemists, mathematicians, 2 botanists, 2 zoologists, as well as medical and material experts. Recently, they were applying to Rinpoche for the participation of some aboriginals in scientific experiments. In other words, they were participating in the work of the research. With the completion of the diesel engine research, Rinpoche was now letting many aboriginal craftsmen make the first tractor by hand. With the participation of many scholars, they were striving to develop a production line that could be mass-produced after the tractor was successfully made. In addition, many other changes had taken place. The first road from Lon City to the Yun Nation had been completely built. Previously, it would take 20 days to get there with goods. Now, it would only take 9 to 10 days to get there. Most of the original prisoners of war were now invested in the construction of the road from Lon City to the Protectorate of the Southeast. A small number of them were used to build the various infrastructure of the new city, including sewers, drainage channels, power lines, and water pipes. In addition, there were dozens of villages in the 60,000 mountains. Nearly 30,000 people came out of the mountains and trekked all the way to the edge of the new city to settle down. The Ministry of Revenue supported them to isolate the waters along the river to breed the strange fish and parasites on them. The resources in Lon City were getting richer and richer, and the entire city was several times more lively than before the war broke out. The number of Aboriginals and Jing tribe people was also several times more than before. As the price of ironware dropped to 1/10 of its original price, the number of Aboriginals carrying swords and sabers on the streets increased, and public security deteriorated. Fortunately, the 8 arenas in and outside Lon City reversed the deteriorating public security situation. At this time, Rinpoche was sitting in the largest arena in the city. On the stage below stood a flaunting young girl in an animal skin tube top and an apron. 10 consecutive victories, 10 consecutive victories. This is Zhu Hua's 10th consecutive victory this week. Is there anyone who wants to challenge her? Are there any warriors who want to challenge her? The current prize money is 300 taels of silver. Rinpoche listened to the repeated shouts in the arena and frowned as he looked at Zhu Hua below. Zhu Hua's brain wasn't very good. According to her own words, she was at most 9 points. However, her recent results were even worse. Her score had dropped from 9 points to 3 points. Furthermore, he couldn't see her in the steam engine improvement research room anymore. Instead, she had placed all her attention on the arena. At present, with her strength, she was considered pretty good among the Kismet heaven-level Aboriginals and could win a sum of money in a short period of time. However, she couldn't continue like this. However, the academy might not be suitable for her. She had also recognized this point and had recently placed her attention elsewhere. Perhaps he should recommend her to the Ministry of War. Rinpoche thought for a long time and watched another of Zhu Hua's matches. His frown gradually eased up. At this time, Rinpoche was holding a book in his hand, which attracted the attention of the people beside him. The main reason was that the cover of the book was made up of high-definition photos of various lolas, prostitutes, and young married women. Chapter 931. Rinpoche was writing a formula on the blackboard when he suddenly sensed something. He turned around and left the classroom to look in the direction of the palace. He could feel an aura full of anger and murderous intent coming from the palace. He was very familiar with this aura. It was the Empress. However, she hadn't been this angry in a long time. Even in the academy, he could feel it. That aura was like a collapsing Mount Bujo that could crash down at any time and crush the people below into minced meat. This class will be a self-study session. Rinpoche turned his head and instructed the students who were looking in the direction of the palace from the window. Then, he dashed straight for the palace. Have I been too kind to them? Do they think that I'm weak when I'm kind to them? Is there anything that they don't dare to do or can't do? Send an order to Zedong Lai to kill everyone in the Yun nation who is above the earth will level. Kill all the sects. I want to hang their heads on top of the city walls of Wangjing so that they will remember it forever. The Empress sat in the seat of honor with her black hair swaying behind her. Her face was ashen, and her eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. Qin Chuan, take my winged cavalry and immediately head for the Yun nation. Remember my words. Leave no one alive. Yes, Your Majesty. I will take my men there now. Qin Chuan cupped his fists. Tai Yen, take the Department of Inspection with you. Those sects are like bugs in the gutter. You have to find all of them. If you can't do it, use your head instead. Everyone in the hall wore a solemn expression. In the face of this furious Empress, no one dared to speak at this time. Moreover, the anger in everyone's hearts was difficult to quell. Even if the Empress didn't give the order, they would still ask for it. Rinpoche stood at the entrance of the hall with an uncertain look on his face. In fact, the Empress saw him when he arrived, but she ignored him and didn't even let him enter the hall. Instead, she directly gave the order. It could be seen that the Empress's anger and desire to kill couldn't be stopped. What happened? Why is Her Majesty so angry? Rinpoche looked uncertain for a long time as he whispered to the imperial guards in front of the palace hall. Your Highness, Vice Protector General Wu Kai was surrounded and killed. His corpse was split into 5 parts, and his head was shot by an arrow into the walls of Pingdu. 100-man patrol teams were ambushed, and all of them died in battle. Commandant Peng Yu and Commandant Li Rui had died in battle. From the 2 commandants to the patrol team, everyone had died without a complete corpse. They had been dismembered after their deaths. Separate the corpses from the heads and pile them up like a tower at the scene. The guard who answered had a fiery look in his eyes. When Rinpoche heard this news, his heart skipped a beat, and his facial expression changed immediately. It's over, something big is going to happen. Wu Kai was the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the Northeast, while Commandant Peng Yu and Li Rui were Cardinal Heaven experts. The 3 of them had actually died in battle, and their corpses weren't even intact. There were also 100-man patrol teams. Even if these people died in battle, the Empress would still be angry, but she wouldn't be so angry that she would issue an order to kill all the practitioners at the Earth Will level and all the sections. Not only did the other party attack and kill these people, but they also dismembered their corpses and piled them up like a tower at the scene. This wasn't just audacious, not to mention throwing Wu Kai's head to Pingdu. Pingdu was originally called Qingping City, and it was now the location of the Protectorate of the Northeast and the center of Dao's rule in the entire Yun nation. One could imagine that the entire Protectorate of the Northeast, from top to bottom, had already begun to sharpen their weapons and were just waiting for the Empress to give the order. At this moment, the Empress had already given the order. One could imagine the uproar and hatred that would be stirred up in this world once they started to take action. Renbocchen stood in place and thought for a long time as he listened to the Empress issuing orders in the hall, including sealing the border between the Yun nation and Great Xia and mobilizing the Protectorate of the North. Almost all of these were targeted at the Yun nation so that the practitioners there had nowhere to escape. Your Majesty, those Great Xia experts who went to the 60,000 mountains are on their way back and will arrive in 2 days. If they find out. Someone said. So what if they find out? This is a matter within Dao's borders. Since they can do it, I won't be lenient and will let them experience my thunderous fury. Kill until no one dares to cause trouble, kill until no one can cause trouble, kill until they are terrified, kill until it is too late for them to regret. The Empress said coldly. She had killed 4 people in a row, and her killing intent was soaring. When the court session ended and everyone filed out, they only cupped their fists and greeted Renbocchen. If the Dao imperial court was divided into the left and the right, then Renbocchen was the only one on the left. Politics. No, the aboriginals only played with knives. When the Empress came out of the hall, Renbocchen naturally followed behind her. Don't try to persuade me. The Empress said directly. They are too bold and have gone overboard. I can't forgive them. Your Majesty, you still have a child in your belly. Don't be so angry. I naturally won't persuade you. I also want to tear them into pieces, but won't this implicate too many people? Renbocchen tried to make his voice calmer and tried to appease the Empress. Implicate too many people. Do you know how many people are involved this time? 10 100-man teams, 2 commandants, and Wu Kai. Humph, if it weren't for such a big incident, I wouldn't have known that so many people were secretly colluding together. The Empress snorted, and her murderous aura didn't diminish in the slightest to 34 spirit will experts and 3,000 earth will experts. They really did a good job. So many people were able to link up such a thing right under my nose. The more the Empress spoke, the more furious she became. The stone bricks that were laid on the ground exploded behind her as she walked. Renbochen's eyebrows twitched. 3,000 earth will experts. There were probably only so many earth will experts in the entire Yun nation. Everyone was involved. How was that possible? Thousands of earth will experts were so determined that they didn't care about their lives and families. Even if they could really make all the experts participate, how could he not have received any information? There was probably something wrong with this. Your Majesty, are you trying to say that there's something wrong with this? The Empress interrupted him coldly. I don't care whether there's a problem or not, how much of the 3,000 earth will experts are not up to standard, and whether there are 1,000 or 500 of them. In short, a large number of experts from the Yun nation are involved in this matter, so I have no reason to let them off. As for those who didn't participate, they are unlucky. Besides, they might not be wrongly accused. At least one of them won't be able to escape without reporting. Renbocchen sighed. Although the Empress usually didn't show it in front of him, she understood everything. It was just that she was too arrogant to say a lot of things. This time, she just wanted to vent her anger. Your Majesty, I want to go with Sir Qin. Renbocchen said after some thought. The Empress stopped in her tracks and asked, do you still want to use the same method as in Tianjing Basin? Divide a group, pull a group, and beat up a group. This isn't what I want. After thinking about it, the anger on the Empress's face eased a little. She sighed softly and said, forget it, I can let you go, but I have a request. Everyone who participated and knows about this must be killed. Chapter 932. Why didn't I know about such an important matter? Renbocchen put his hands on his knees and looked at the 2 men in front of him calmly. Your Highness, Her Majesty's news came directly from the Protectorate of the Northeast, and we had to wait 1.5 days for the messenger bird to arrive, one of the men said with an aggrieved look. Directly from the Protectorate of the Northeast. Who are you? What are you responsible for? What are you doing? Why wasn't there any news of such an important matter? Didn't you notice any clues? What's the use of you people then? Are you useless? Renbochen's voice became calmer, and his face remained calm. However, his words were merciless, and the sweat on the heads of the two men increased. Please calm down, Your Highness. We didn't do our job well. Please give us another chance. We will definitely get to the bottom of this matter. The two of them didn't dare to argue anymore and said, Calm down. Her Majesty is angry. What can I do to appease her? Renbochen snorted and looked at the two men gloomily. We didn't do our job well. Renbochen sat in the seat of honor and looked down at the two men for a long time before saying, Investigate. Every bit of information, every trace of it, had to be thoroughly investigated. Don't let go of even the slightest bit. There won't be a next time. Yes. Renbochen rubbed his eyebrows after the two men left. This matter didn't only concern the Yun nation, but also the integration of the Aboriginals and other races. Even the Jing tribe was included. After all, the Jing tribe was also considered an outsider to the Aboriginals. It had only been 4 years since they came to Lon City in broad daylight. Although this matter concerned the Jing tribe, Renbochen didn't say it out loud. He didn't want others to think that the Jing tribe and the Aboriginals were separated. In fact, he couldn't let them have such thoughts. Even the people of the Jing tribe couldn't integrate with the Aboriginals. Other people could feel this way, but he couldn't let these words come out of his mouth. As a superior, he had to pay attention to every word and action. With the Empress's anger, the violent machine of Dao immediately started to operate. Except for 500 of the 2,000 winged cavalry warriors who stayed behind in Lon City, the rest followed Qin River to the Yun nation under the Empress's orders. As for the Protectorate of the North, Hongwu also dispatched 10,000 soldiers and their experts. Renbochen didn't set off with Qin Chuan. Instead, he continued to stay in Lon City. On one hand, he had to arrange some matters, including the academy, various research institutes, the Department of Commerce, and even the Protectorate. Most importantly, he was still waiting for the many experts who had returned from the 60,000 mountains. If he wasn't here and those experts heard about this when they returned, there might be some trouble. After all, those experts definitely wouldn't just stand by and watch. The Yun nation had always been a part of Great Xia, and the ancestors of the people of the Yun nation were also from Great Xia. It was difficult to separate the two sides. Since Dao had conquered the Yun nation, they couldn't say anything based on their status. However, if Dao wanted to start a massacre in the Yun nation, many people would definitely oppose it. Given the Empress's current situation, she couldn't tolerate any disobedience. In such a situation, he could only mediate by himself. Besides, he had an idea. Was this really done by the people of the Yun nation? All the experts in the Yun nation had given up their lives. How could this be? There must be a problem somewhere. Previously, Su Xianxian was poisoned and Luohua sect was exterminated. What was their purpose? Were they targeting Luohua sect or Dao? Although there was no evidence, Renbochen felt that there was an invisible connection between these two incidents. This was because the consequences of these two incidents were to provoke the relationship between Dao, Great Xia, and the practitioners of the Yun nation. In particular, if this incident wasn't handled well, the entire Yun nation would be in turmoil. The Aboriginals would also be isolated and hated by the practitioners of other countries. It would be extremely difficult for the homecoming organization to achieve its original goal of absorbing all the experts of the human race. Renbochen suspected that the foreign races had spies among the human race. After waiting in Lon City for 4 days, Renbochen finally saw everyone return. Beside him were Lin Yu, who was holding melon seeds, and Lin Chaola, who was holding a lollipop in her mouth. Lin Yu. Ren Baqin didn't know what she was thinking. After eating melon seeds in Lawn City for 10 months, she wandered around the city in high spirits every day. She even bought 2 Jean Ping Mei books. One for herself to read, and the other for her collection. As for Lin Chaola, Ren Baqin felt that he couldn't let her continue to eat, sleep, and eat. It just so happened that he was going to the Yun Nation and needed to bring 2 experts with him, so he pulled her out of this cycle. After that, Lin Chaola and Lin Yu got into a fight and became very close after that. As for the reason for the fight, Lin Chaola felt that milk candy was the most delicious, while Lin Yu felt that melon seeds were the most delicious. Just like how Ren Baqin didn't understand why the 2 of them fought over this matter, he also didn't understand how these 2 stupid girls could eat from the same bowl in just 2 days. Lin Yu's wooden food bowl was always carried with her and never let anyone touch it. However, there was something that Ren Baqin wanted to tell Lin Yu several times, but he didn't know if he should say it. He had never seen Lin Chaola wash that bowl. The 3 of them waited for an hour at the top of the city wall, and finally, the experts returned. Unlike when they set off with full confidence, the people who returned weren't dejected, but they weren't in high spirits either. It could be imagined that more than a dozen top experts besieged one person, only to end up seriously injured, and one of them even died. If the other party hadn't missed the opportunity and couldn't escape, these experts would have been too ashamed to face anyone. In addition to the many experts who returned, there were also 2 carriages that were covered with cloth, and the Negu people were locked inside. Everyone, it's been hard on you all this time. Ren Baqin greeted them with a smile. It's nothing. Everyone waved their hands and said with an ugly expression, this time, we finally know that we are still frogs in the well. Everyone, let's go back to the city and rest first. Her Majesty has prepared a banquet for everyone. Ren Baqin led everyone back to the city. This wasn't the time to talk yet. Before they reached Beihong district, someone said, the atmosphere in the city seems a little off. The way the commoners look at us is also different from the last time. Did something big happen? He had to admit that these experts were really sharp enough to be able to detect a slight change in the atmosphere in the city so quickly after 10 months. Something happened in the Yun Nation. 34 spirit will experts and thousands of earth will experts surrounded and killed the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the Northeast, as well as 2 lieutenant generals and 10 100-man patrol teams. They even dismembered the corpses into pieces and piled them up. How is that possible? Everyone was surprised to hear this news. There were only a few thousand Earth will experts in the entire Yun Nation. Thousands of Earth will experts participated in the siege. Furthermore, they used such a cruel method. Their reaction was the same as Ren Baqin's, it was impossible. Ren Baqin frowned and said, if I wasn't waiting for you, I would have set off long ago. The impact of this matter is too great. Her Majesty is also furious, and blood will flow like a river. We must find out who is behind this so that it doesn't lead to a disaster. Qi Zixiao. Everyone sensed something unusual from Ren Baqin's words. This matter is Dayo's internal affairs. Not only is Her Majesty furious, but I am also furious. I am going to the Yun Nation this time to give those who didn't participate in this matter one last chance. As for whether they can grasp this opportunity, it will depend on themselves. Everyone frowned. Ren Baqin immediately said that this matter was Dayo's internal affairs and that he was telling them about it. It couldn't be without reason. Everyone understood what he meant. Let's talk about this with the old beggar later. The old beggar has 2 acquaintances in that area. They can help us ask if there's any misunderstanding or if someone is playing tricks on us. It's impossible for all the practitioners of the Yun Nation to be involved in this matter. Gluttonous Duke said with a frown. I have a junior who is staying in the Yun Nation. I can also write a letter and have Zhao Prince Consort deliver it to him, Gao Yi said straightforwardly. If he wanted to kill all the practitioners of the Yun Nation, these people would naturally oppose it. Since Rinpoche had the intention to investigate this matter, it meant that there was still a chance to turn things around. At the very least, there wouldn't be too many innocent people, and everyone was willing to help him. I have nothing to do right now, so I will go with you. You won't be unwelcoming, right? Li Yuanzhu nodded at Rinpoche. Not only Rinpoche, but she also immediately thought of the poisoning of Su Xianxian and the extermination of the entire Luohua sect. The similarity between these two incidents was that the other party's methods were astonishing, and the strength hidden in the dark was also very astonishing. Whether it was poisoning Su Xianxian and putting him in a life-or-death situation or exterminating the entire Luohua sect, these weren't things that ordinary forces could do. Moreover, the impact of these two incidents was detrimental to the integration of the entire human martial arts world, and there might be some relationship between them. Chapter 933. The banquet that night could not be considered lively. After all, everyone did not return victorious. In fact, it could even be said that they were dejected. However, this banquet couldn't be skipped. The next day, many of the experts returned while he headed for the Yun Nation. In addition to Lin Chaola, Lin Yu, Lin Chaola's best friend, also came along. The two girls, who weren't very smart, felt like old friends at first sight. They regretted not meeting each other earlier. Buy one, get one free. The other two were Gluttonous Duke and Li Yuanzhu. There was also another person who Rinpoche would never have thought of, Exanjia. Her Majesty has ordered me to follow Zhao Prince Consort no matter where he goes. Exanjia pushed up her spectacles, which flashed brightly. His Majesty asked you to protect me. Do you need to follow me to the washroom? Rinpoche laughed. This commander's greatest strength was his loyalty, but his greatest weakness was that he only had loyalty. Alright, he was good at fighting. However, he knew nothing about what was happening outside the palace. No, Your Majesty means to follow them. Even when we eat and sleep, we have to follow him. Exanjia said frankly. Exanjia believed that she had completely understood the Empress's orders. Rinpoche opened his mouth. Even if Her Majesty wants you to keep an eye on me, can't you at least say that it's my personal protection? Was there a need to be so direct? She nodded at him and smiled. Qi Zixiao is very attentive to you, her husband. Rinpoche sighed faintly. Isn't that person guarding against you? Women. Be it the emperor of a country or the lowly peddler, there were some things that people were born with. This was talent. But Your Majesty, aren't you thinking too much? After all, he's the third most powerful expert in the world. How many of them would be as blind as you are? People nowadays only know how to look at appearances, how superficial. What was the use of looking at one's face? Wouldn't they still have to compete in the end? Ahem, I'm wrong. That's the third most powerful expert in the world, Lin Chaola, who can't be abducted by a lollipop. Lin Yu wasn't someone who could be abducted with just a handful of melon seeds. Depart. On the road, Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke noticed that the road from Lan City to the Yun Nation was different from other places. There was an extremely clean and tidy road that looked like stone but wasn't. They had seen this material in Lan City before. It seemed to be called cement. He didn't expect Deo to use this material to pave the roads. Where does this road lead to? She asked. Yun Nation. How extravagant. This path didn't exist a few years ago. Gluttonous Duke was speechless. From construction to completion, it took a total of more than 3 years and is more than 1,600 kilometers long. Rinpoche was quite proud of this road. This was the first official road in Deo, but it wasn't the last. With this path, we can probably shorten the time by half. You guys have put in a lot of effort. It seems like those nobles from the Yun Nation who have escaped don't have to suffer anymore. Gluttonous Duke said casually. Putting aside Rinpoche's nuclear bombs, it would only take 4 to 5 days to travel from Lon City to the Yun Nation on horseback. It would be difficult for those people to cause any trouble. The railway from Lon City to the Yun Nation, which is still under construction, has been completed. In 2 days, we can send 100,000 soldiers from Lon City to the Yun Nation. Rinpoche pointed into the distance. The two of them were skeptical. It was not impossible to cover 1,000 miles in 2 days. If it was the big bird that Rinpoche was riding, it could reach in 1 day. However, it was different for 100,000 soldiers. Including provisions and armaments, it wasn't a small number. It would be good if they could reach the speed of a normal carriage in about 10 days. Although the two of them had never led troops before, they could imagine it. Rinpoche saying that it would only take 2 days was really amazing. Hey, this road is better than the official road in Great Xia. Lin Yu suddenly exclaimed after half a day on this road, and the three of them chatted for a long time. It's indeed much better than the previous road. The original road is covered in mud when we run. Lin Chaola nodded her head. She had followed Rinpoche to many places and knew the condition of those dirt roads very well. Lin Yu looked pensive. The next day, she continued to look pensive. On the third day, she suddenly thought of something and said, "Your alms bowl seems to have a smell." Rinpoche immediately covered his face. "You two have been eating from the same alms bowl for several days, and you only realize this now. This is body fragrance." He said so. Lin Chaola pointed at Rinpoche. Lin Yu continued to look pensive. Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke had strange looks in their eyes. Both of them could tell that Lin Chaola wasn't very smart, but people who weren't smart wouldn't lie. How did Rinpoche say this to her? It wasn't uncommon for rabbits to eat the grass near their nests, but to dare to eat grass near Qi Zixiao's nest was really bold. Rinpoche quickly said, I didn't say that." "Lin Chaola, when did you learn to make false accusations?" "That time, when you ate from Her Majesty's bowl, you said that it had body fragrance." Lin Chaola said righteously with a "don't try to deny it" look on her face. Rinpoche was speechless. The group brought 50 guards, all of whom were riding high-quality mounts, and caught up with Qin Chuan at the border of the Yun Nation in 4 days. "Sir Qin, this time, the two of us are out on a mission. We will have to trouble you." Rinpoche cupped his hands. "Zhao Prince Consort, you don't just do things, right?" Qin Chuan cupped his hands at Rinpoche, looked up, and pointed at Li Yuanzhu and the others with his chin. "Forget it, I can't control what Zhao Prince Consort wants to do. Her Majesty gave me an order to not let anyone off. This is Her Majesty's order." Rinpoche handed the Empress's handwritten letter to Qin Chuan. After he opened it, he felt as if there was a mountain on the paper, and every word was a beautiful mountain peak. This was the Empress's handwriting. The essence, qi, and spirit of her handwriting were all condensed in it. Ordinary people would be intimidated by the words at a glance, but experts could see the strength of the person who wrote it. Back then, the Empress had used this method to deceive many experts in Great Xia. Qin Chuan glanced at it, folded the letter seriously, and put it in his pocket. "Sir Ren, I will head to Pingdu first and rest there for a month. I will also use this time to collect information on the various sections. After a month, I will sweep through each and every sect, from the big to the small, and let them see if my saber is sharp." "Thank you, Sir Qin." Rinpoche smiled. 1 month wasn't a long time. However, at this time, it was considered not bad. As for collecting information on the various sects, it was just a casual excuse. Zi Donglai had probably checked all the ancestors of the various sects in the Yun Nation by now. "We will meet again in Ping City in 1 month." Rinpoche cupped his hands at Qin Chuan. This time, it was different from the last time in Tianjing Basin. In Tianjing Basin, everything was laid out in the open. Whether it was the other party or his own side, they could crush them with force. This time, there was a mastermind hiding behind the scenes. If they did the same thing as last time, they probably wouldn't be able to find anything even after a month. At that time, all the practitioners in the Yun nation would be wiped out. Thus, they simply split up. Of course, Rinpoche didn't expect their whereabouts to be hidden from others, but it was more convenient to act this way. Besides, with Li Yuanzhu, Gluttonous Duke, Lin Yu, Lin Chaola, and Xanzhu around, there was no need to worry about their safety. Chapter 934. After getting rid of the guards, Rinpoche felt relaxed. This was the first time since he came to this world that he didn't have to bring rows of guards with him. Although Lin Chaola was by his side, there was no difference whether this girl was there or not. As for Xanzhu, wouldn't it be nice to keep her by his side? However, she really carried out what she said back then. She would follow Rinpoche even to the toilet. Even when he returned to Earth, she would sleep on the floor of his bedroom and wear her armor. Rinpoche felt that he was going crazy from being stared at for the past 2 days. With someone staring at you from behind, most people wouldn't even be able to pee. Other than this small flaw, Rinpoche was still full of anticipation for this trip. Thinking about it, apart from Xanzhu, there weren't any aboriginals accompanying him. On his left was the third most powerful expert in the world, on his right was an expert ranked 20 or so, and behind him was an expert ranked 10 or so who wasn't very smart. Apart from Gluttonous Duke, all of them were accompanied by beautiful women, although most of them had holes in their brains. However, the identities of these people made Rinpoche look forward to roaming the world. Their happiness lasted until they entered the city. What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a bald man before? Rinpoche glared at the guards at the city gate with a fierce look on his face. They had been staring at his bald head for a long time. A guard smiled and said, "Please wait a moment." However, a few minutes later, another person with a slightly higher position rushed over. He seemed to be the leader of a small squad. He stepped forward and cupped his hands respectfully. "May I know which ancient lord you are? What brings you to Liang City?" Rinpoche knew that he wasn't an aboriginal. Even though he didn't think so, to others, this person in front of him was definitely an aboriginal. He was bald, tall, and had a ferocious look on his face. Just a glare from his eyes would cause one's heart to tremble. Regardless of whether it was the Yun nation or Great Xia, it wasn't that there weren't any burly people, but that there weren't any baldies. Even if one was really bald, one would need to pluck a few handfuls of hair from somewhere else to cover his head. In the past, baldies were rarely seen in the Yun nation, but recently, they were common. However, they were all in groups, whizzing by. "I don't see anyone acting alone." Therefore, the captain was a little nervous when he saw Rinpoche alone. He didn't know the other party's purpose for coming. "Which eye of yours thinks that I'm from the aboriginals?" Rinpoche glared. "Ha!" The squad leader was stunned. No matter how he looked at it, the person in front of him looked like an aboriginal, but if he was really an aboriginal, he definitely wouldn't say such a thing. "Aren't I just a little bald? A little fatter? Is there anyone in the aboriginals with such delicate features like me?" Rinpoche threw 2 silver beans at her. The other party didn't know if there was anyone in the ancient race who was as handsome as him. But there was definitely no one who would greet them the moment they met. If they were really aboriginals, they would be punched and kicked if they were even a little slower in giving way. Last time, the 2 guards at the west gate were the same. One of them suffered a kick and was sent flying, vomiting blood on the spot. He was bedridden for half a month. Thinking of this, the squad leader felt relieved and hurriedly gave way with a smile. Even though the person in front of him wasn't the granddaddy of the ancient race, he wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. In particular, this group of people looked very strange. There was a bald Aboriginal man, a Taoist nun, 2 beautiful ladies, and a beggar. With such a group of people gathered together, one didn't need to think to know that they were people from the Jianghu. Rinpoche and his group entered the city. Even though Rinpoche tried his best to appear very experienced along the way, his gaze was like that of a curious baby. There were even 2 curious babies following behind him. After all, he had been in Dao ever since he came here. Even though he had been to Great Xia once, he was in a seriously injured state. Along the way, he had been wandering around the wilderness and had never seen the cities of Great Xia before. Hey, that's a sugar figurine, right? It's quite rare. How much is it? Give me 10. Pinch our faces. If you don't do it well, I won't give you money. That's a handmade lantern. This is the first time I've seen this kind of thing, and it's quite beautiful. Boss, what's this fruit? Is it sweet? How much is 1 caddy? Rinpoche asked for some information, threw a silver bean over, and said, "Give me 10 caddies." He stuffed all the fruits that looked like mangoes into Lin Chaola's arms and took one for himself, munching on it as he walked. Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke were amused by his behavior. They knew that these things were rare in Dao, but they didn't know that these things had always been rare to Rinpoche. After walking for a long time, Rinpoche suddenly stopped and asked, "Have you noticed that after walking for so long, we haven't seen anyone who looks like they're from the underworld?" Rinpoche's first reaction was that those practitioners from the underworld were hiding somewhere and waiting to welcome the coming storm. This place is too close to the border, and it has been chaotic for the past 2 years. Which martial artist would come here for no reason? Gluttonous Duke casually explained. Rinpoche finally understood. Even though the Yun nation had fallen for 2 years and this place wasn't considered the border anymore, it was still the border in the eyes of the people of the Yun nation. Everyone stayed in Liang City for a day, allowing Rinpoche to enjoy traveling abroad in a feudal society. Over the next few days, they passed by a few more cities and found that there were no practitioners from the underworld. Not only Liang City, but the other cities also couldn't see any practitioners, especially Shi City, which they had just arrived at. They were already in the heart of the Yun nation, but there were still no traces of practitioners from the underworld. Except for the 3 of them, everyone else felt that something was wrong. The other party's power isn't small. Rinpoche looked serious. He still didn't believe that all the practitioners from the Yun nation could band together to kill Wu Kai and the patrol team, so the current situation could only be caused by the other party. However, he didn't know how they did it. How could they capture so many practitioners from the Yun nation? Other than the Imperial Court of Dao, which force could do such a thing? Even the Imperial Court of Great Xia couldn't do it. This wasn't just a few dozen or hundreds of pigs, but thousands of experts who could leap onto roofs and vault over walls. There's a place called Shueibua village half a day's journey away from here. I met their chief several times when I was traveling when I was young. I'll go and see what's going on. Gluttonous Duke said to Rinpoche, "Wait for me here. I'll set off now and we'll be back tomorrow night." "Thank you." Rinpoche nodded. Gluttonous Duke left his horse behind and went into the crowd. He found a place with fewer people, appeared on a roof in the distance, and left the city in a few flashes. At this time, everyone's mounts had been changed to horses. After all, the mounts of the Aboriginals were too eye-catching, especially the Crow General. Once it flashed its bird, people would know that it was Rinpoche who was coming without having to identify himself. After Gluttonous Duke left, Rinpoche searched the city for a moment and found a grocery store with the word Zhang written on it. He made a mark on the wall with his finger before finding a place to rest. Chapter 935. Your Highness. Renbochin was leaning against the railing on the second floor and looking down at the hall when a man hurried over to greet him. Renbochin smiled. He had seen the other party when he first entered the door, and it was an old acquaintance. Zhang Chongkong. He was the chief of the Golden Ring residence and Zhang Caixin's father. He was currently the vice-captain of the Yun Guards of the Rearguard Commandery. After a few years, Zhang Chongkong seemed to be more energetic. He wondered if this old tree had bloomed again after being alone in the Yun nation for so long. Otherwise, why did it look so radiant? However, these things had nothing to do with him. Renbochin turned around and entered the room. "Come in and talk." Xianja was standing behind him just now. When she saw him enter the room, she immediately followed him in and stood in a corner without saying a word. Zhang Chongkong carefully closed the door and acted as if he didn't see Xianja. "Why are you here, Your Highness?" "I heard that there was a man who looked like an aboriginal heading east from Liang City. I wanted to investigate when I had the time, but I didn't expect it to be Your Highness." Renbochin nodded slightly. He didn't tell the people of the Rearguard Commandery that he was coming. They had done a good job of noticing him when most of their energy was focused on that big case. After all, they had only been in the Yun nation for more than 3 years and didn't have enough manpower. It seemed like they were developing well locally. If Renbochin remembered correctly, there were about 10,000 strong men in the Yun nation scattered across more than 400 cities. On average, there were about 20 to 30 people in each city. The lowest position in the Rearguard Commandery was the Tiki, an internal staff member. This kind of strong man was an external staff member, equivalent to a lifelong contract worker, and was mainly responsible for being an informant. "Has there been any movement in the Yun nation recently? How is your investigation going?" Renbochin asked directly. "Your Highness, ever since that incident, the number of Jianghu people on the streets began to decrease. After that incident, the idle Jianghu people on the streets could hardly be seen anymore. Only the martial artists from the gangs would occasionally appear. We originally built a relationship with some of the Yun nation's martial artists and even recruited a few of them as strong men. We got some information from them, but we haven't confirmed it yet, so we haven't reported it to Your Highness." Zhang Chongkong said respectfully. "Speak." "Many martial artists living in remote places have left recently, and their whereabouts are unknown. Looking at their residences, there were no signs of a fight. They had all left on their own. Some of the experts from the sects have gone into seclusion, but the experts from the big sects are the same as usual. It seems like nothing has changed." "What's the situation with the gangs in the Yun nation? Tell me more." Renbochin closed his eyes and listened to Zhang Chongkong's voice. "There are a total of 127 well-known sects and gangs in the Yun nation. Among them, there are a total of 13 well-known sections. Among them, there are 10 orthodox sects, 2 sects that are neither orthodox nor evil, and there is only one evil sect. These 13 sects were the strongest in terms of strength, status, and influence. They were called the upper 13 sects. In other words, the ones I mentioned just now that weren't affected. Apart from the 13 upper sects, there were 41 other sects with spirit will experts. Almost all of them only had one spirit will expert. These sects weren't weak either. Altogether, they had close to 50,000 disciples. The rest were mainly gangs formed by earth will experts or sects that used to have spirit will experts but had declined. Their scope of operations was limited to one city, and there were even 2 or 3 gangs in the vicinity of a city. There were quite a lot of people in these gangs, but there weren't many experts. In particular, the power of these gangs was mostly in the marketplace. The people we roped in were from these gangs. They weren't as cohesive as the sections. Most of their experts were recruited from outside, so they were easier to rope in." "How many sects aren't affected now?" Renbochin asked after pondering for a while. "As far as we know, there are a total of 34 sects that weren't affected. The chiefs of the other sects are either practicing in seclusion or traveling outside. Were the incidents that happened a few days ago done by these sects? According to our recent investigations, there were more or less experts in these sects whose whereabouts were unknown. As for the rest, we still need time to investigate. Renbochin opened his eyes, which were filled with coldness. In other words, these sects are all possible. Yes. However, we have calculated that there are only a few hundred experts whose whereabouts are unknown. It seems that they weren't able to quickly surround and kill the patrol team, and none of them escaped. If the top experts were to take action, they would be able to do it. Are there any abnormalities among the ordinary disciples of those sects? He knew that many things in this world couldn't be calculated according to common sense. A few hundred people couldn't seem to kill the patrol team, Wu Kai, Ping Yu, and Li Rui. However, there was a species in this world called the top experts. As long as 2 or 3 of the top experts on the list were involved, it would be enough. No, they have only shrunk their range of activities, and there are no signs of large-scale deployment. Continue to investigate and seize the time. If possible, find a breakthrough in those sections. As for the price, nothing is more important than their lives. In addition, seize the time to investigate the situation of the top experts in the Yun Nation. Renbochin said. Understood. Go. After Zhang Chongkong left, the coldness in Renbochin's eyes gradually faded, and he frowned. If it was true that so many sects were involved, it would be difficult to deal with them. Even if some of the experts and ordinary disciples weren't involved, the Empress and all the court officials were furious. They didn't have the mood to determine whether these disciples deserved to die or not. As long as they were involved, they couldn't let any of them go. The Empress's order was to kill all the practitioners at the Earth Will level, and the other order was to kill all the sections. The former referred to the idle martial artists of the Jianghu, while the other referred to the more than 100 sections. Had the experts of the Yun Nation gone mad? Did more than 100 sects have someone from each sect who dared to participate? Or was there some organization that had its tentacles in all the sects? If that was the case, this organization was really scary. What do you think? Renbochin asked without turning his head. They deserve to die. Xianzhe's cold voice sounded. Renbochin rubbed his eyebrows. Xianzhe knew his purpose for coming here, let alone the rest of the court and the Empress. He reckoned that even the Empress didn't have high hopes this time. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, but that she wanted to kill them all. TSK. I'm doing this to save tens of thousands of lives. I'm really a saint. My wife wants to kill someone, and I come to save them myself. Renbochin mocked himself. The door was pushed open, and Li Yuanzhu walked in. She said to Renbochin calmly, "This is for the entire human race." The temperament of the Aboriginals was like that. They were unreasonable. You are reasonable, far-sighted, and have great ambitions. That's why you're here. Renbochin pondered for a while, smiled at her, and said, "I can still praise you a little more. I don't think I'm arrogant yet." Li Yuanzhu chuckled. "These are words from the bottom of my heart, Yuanzhu." Renbochin lamented, "Being praised by the third most powerful expert in the world makes me drunk even though I don't have any wine." Li Yuanzhu pursed her lips and smiled without saying a word. She was puzzled as to why Qi Zixia would choose such a weak man as her husband. Renbochin wasn't even a man-will expert at the time and was just an ordinary person. Compared to Qi Zixia, one was in the sky and the other was in the ground. That's right, he was underground, not above ground. However, from their recent interactions, Qi Zixia had good foresight even though she wasn't good in other aspects. Although this person wasn't strong, he was indeed talented. However, he wasn't proficient in poetry and songs like those scholars. Instead, he was proficient in all aspects. In terms of the nation, Tianjing Basin was subdued by him, and the Jing tribe people now followed his lead. The current situation of the Yun nation was his plan. If it weren't for this incident, the Yun nation would have stabilized in just 2 years. He was the one who wanted to build the official road. Although he hadn't seen its use yet, anyone with a little knowledge would know how useful it was. It was said that Dayo's plan to build a new capital along the river was also planned by him. The shaved ice, glass, street lamps, soap, toothpaste, and even the well salt produced by Dayo during the war were all made by him. As the principal of an academy, he established the first academy in Dayo and nurtured a group of students with practical abilities. He opened bookstores, published newspapers, and enlightened the people. The organization of the Yun nation also relied on him to build the framework. He was also the one who took out the so-called nuclear warheads. Now, he was running around for these Yun nation warriors. It could be said that he alone was equivalent to 1 million soldiers. It had to be said that Qi Zixiao had picked up a treasure. Chapter 936. The people here are so skinny. Lin Chaola sat on the edge of the bed and muttered as she looked at the people below, they're just like the electric poles in Lon City. Not only was he thin, but he also had a hunched waist. When he walked on the side of the road, he lowered his head and walked quickly. They are all ordinary people. Ren Baqin said faintly, no matter what kind of society you live in, there will always be the poor and the rich. The rich will be rich, while the poor will find it difficult to find food and clothing. These people are still all right. Although their faces are a little malnourished, they still look healthy. If you have the money to eat vegetables, you might as well eat more meat. Lin Chaola muttered and turned her head away. Ren Baqin, well said. If he had grown up in an environment like Dayo, he would probably say, why not eat minced meat? Here, these words were not exclusive to those pampered young masters. The aboriginal commoners were extremely astonished and said, he can actually afford to eat. I might as well buy some meat to eat. Just look at the people in the prison camp. No matter where they came from, they ate meat until they vomited, and their eyes lit up when they saw a wild vegetable. However, there were also many benefits. They ate meat every day until they vomited and worked hard every day, so their physiques were much stronger. Compared to the city guards of the Yun nation, they looked more like elite soldiers. It had been 3 years. When he returned, he would have to give them paper vouchers as their salaries. On one hand, it was to give these prisoners of war something to look forward to and strive to keep a group of them as technicians after the end of the decade. On the other hand, it was also to prepare for the currency reform. After all, it was inconvenient to use gold, silver, and copper as currency. It also consumed a large amount of copper to circulate in the market. Copper happened to be a metal that Ren Baqin desperately needed at the moment. Electric wires, voltage regulator rheostat, and telephone lines. The annual copper output of Dayo and the Yun nation was simply a drop in the bucket compared to what he needed. Copper alloy has excellent wear resistance, corrosion resistance, castability, and mechanical properties. It can also play a great role in a variety of bearings and mechanical parts. Just like on Earth, the quality of a lot of equipment could be determined by looking at whether the internal parts were made of copper. No matter what, Ren Baqin couldn't tolerate this metal, which had such huge uses, being used as currency in the market. However, he had to settle the matters in the Yun nation first before he could do this. What about those sex experts who were in seclusion or wandering outside? More than half of the leaders of more than 100 sects had actually made such a gesture. What were they doing? Or was he hiding from something? Let's wait and see the news that gluttonous Duke brings back first. If it doesn't work, I might as well capture a few sect leaders and ask them. While Ren Baqin was deep in thought, a figure passed through the window and landed beside them. He was wearing patched clothes, had messy white hair and beard, and had a face full of wrinkles. It was Gluttonous Duke. First, he grabbed the wine pot and took a big gulp before letting out a comfortable moan. "You've worked hard. How's the situation? Any news?" Ren Bachien asked. Gluttonous Duke stroked his beard with an ugly expression on his face. "We've missed. The people in the stronghold are all gone. Strange, why did that guy leave? And all the people in the stronghold had left. From what I've seen, he's been gone for at least 3 months, and there's no sign of him returning." Ren Bachin frowned. Although he didn't have eyebrows, his action was still the same. This is not good news. This also confirmed Zhang Changkong's words. Some idol experts had gone missing. What's his name? What's his strength? Lin Yi. The last time I saw him was 10 years ago. At that time, he was only 1 step away from condensing a heaven-grade weapon. Those who could condense a heaven-grade weapon were already considered top-notch experts. As long as it wasn't a rare situation where a heaven-grade weapon didn't improve one's strength, it wouldn't be a problem for one to enter the top 60 to 70 ranks of the world's experts. There were more than 20 spirit wool experts in Tianjing Basin, but only a few had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. There were only 70 to 80 spirit wool experts in the entire Yun nation, and only a dozen or so had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. There were more experts in Great Xia. There were more than 200 famous spirit wool experts and 30 to 40 who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. They were only 1 step away from condensing a heaven-grade weapon and could be said to be famous in the entire world. Such a person suddenly disappeared, coupled with the experts from the sects who were either in seclusion or traveling. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was very unusual. Ren Bachin pondered for a moment before looking up at Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke. The former was also pondering, while the latter was chewing to his heart's content. One could tell what he liked from his name. He isn't the only one who has gone missing. Many people have gone missing as well. Ren Bachin told them about the news that he had received from Zhang Changkong. It was mainly about Gluttonous Duke. Although Li Yuanzhu wasn't in the room at that time, the sounds in the entire inn couldn't escape her ears. In that case, something big must have happened. Gluttonous Duke's expression immediately turned serious. "Let's split up," Ren Bachin said in a deep voice. "Gluttonous Duke, contact your old friends and Gao Yi's Jr. If you don't find anything, then take the opportunity to investigate the situation. Gluttonous Duke, you can make the decision yourself. As for Jinrenli, I have something to trouble you with." "That's settled then. Where shall we meet?" Gluttonous Duke didn't hesitate at all. He reached out to wipe the grease stains on the side of his mouth and prepared to set off again. "Meet at Yongjiang City in half a month." A map of the Yun nation flashed across Ren Bachin's mind. The largest sect of the Yun nation was nearby, Mount Luofu. "All right." After saying this, Gluttonous Duke disappeared as if he had never been there. There were 2 other tables of customers on the 2nd floor of the restaurant. They had long noticed this strange group of people and immediately widened their eyes when they saw this scene as if they had seen a ghost in broad daylight. A moment later, Ren Bachin contacted Zhang Changkong. Zhang Changkong knew that he was here and had been keeping an eye on him. Less than 15 minutes after Ren Bachin left the mark, Zhang Changkong appeared in front of him. Ren Bachin inquired about the situation of the surrounding sects and asked Zhang Changkong to investigate Lin Ye's whereabouts. He then found Li Yuanzhu and said, "Jinrenli, there's a boat gang nearby. I'm going to meet their leader tonight. What are your plans?" "He's in seclusion, right? I'll go with you tonight and take a look. I'm getting more and more curious." Li Yuanzhu said faintly. "All right. Regardless of whether there's a mastermind behind this, they definitely won't let you off if they know that you're here. If you die, I'm afraid that we'll have to spend the rest of our lives in this land of exile. Ren Baqin smiled. He believed that he had a little ability to protect himself, mainly because Lin Chaola, Xianzhe, and Lin Yu had the ability to protect him. However, even the Deputy Protector General and 2 Captain Commanders of the Protectorate of the Northeast were besieged and killed on the same day. The strength of the other party was definitely far superior to his side. Of course, he could escape with a few people and come back with his big treasure. However, there would be a lot more variables. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 937. The Boat Gang. Just from the name, one could tell that it was a gang filled with the aura of a marketplace. The boat gang was established more than 100 years ago. At that time, a boat captain met a seriously injured and dying practitioner by chance and obtained a few secret manuals from him. It had to be said that he was quite talented. Relying on self-study and communicating with others, he was able to make a name for himself and become an earth will expert. At that time, he was grateful for the hard life of his brothers who ran the boat. Now that they were strong, he established the boat gang with the aim of uniting them and not being bullied. The current leader of the boat gang was a descendant of that boat captain. In addition to the leader, there were 2 other earth will experts in the boat gang. In the middle section of Mianjiang, they were considered to have some power. Of course, in Ren Baqin's eyes, this power was basically no different from that of ordinary people. 3 earth will experts weren't enough for Lin Chaola to sharpen her claws. The boat gang wasn't located on the banks of Mianjiang, but at the foot of a mountain not far away. There was a large manor there. At night, Ren Baqin and the others left their mounts in the city and went straight to the boat gang. After running for a long time, Lin Yu suddenly asked, "What are you doing out so late at night?" She didn't know anything, and when she saw everyone coming out, she followed them without a second thought. Of course, if she were to think about it, she would have to think about tomorrow morning. To meet someone. Ren Baqin replied. Lin Yu only responded with an "oh." If there were any problems, they would have to wait until tomorrow morning. The headquarters of the boat gang was quite big and brightly lit. There were tens of thousands of disciples in the boat gang, and most of them were ordinary people. There were usually a few hundred people in the headquarters. There were 4 guards outside the main gate. Ren Baqin and the others went around to the side and jumped onto the wall. They could see people coming and going in the distance. Overall, it was peaceful, and they didn't know that someone had found them. Ren Baqin squatted on top of the wall while Lin Yu squatted beside him. They were like a row of melon eaters. Ren Baqin heard crunching sounds and turned to see that Lin Yu was still eating melon seeds. He didn't know how many she had brought from Lon City, but she hadn't finished them after so many days. Be serious. We are doing business, Ren Baqin said with a straight face. You want to eat? Lin Yu stretched out her hand and opened it. There was still half a handful of melon seeds left. Ren Baqin, without hesitation, he snatched the melon seeds and squatted on top of the wall to observe. After finishing half a handful of melon seeds, Ren Baqin happened to see someone coming in from the half-moon gate. He was delighted and ordered, "Capture him and keep him alive." With a gust of wind, Xianzhe appeared beside that person. Before that person could react, she had already grabbed him by the neck. Ren Baqin motioned for Xianzhe to release him after dragging him far away. It was a young man in his 20s. He looked at the people in front of him in fear. Who are you people? Recognize your own situation. I'm the one asking you, not you. A silver light flashed in Ren Baqin's hand. A gold and silver spear appeared in his hand, and he pointed it at the other party's throat. She looked at him in astonishment. This was obviously a heaven-grade weapon that could only be condensed by a spirit will expert. How could he have one? Was he hiding his strength? Impossible. It was impossible for the other party to hide from him. Or could it be that he was a spirit world expert in the past, but he was seriously injured and fell? No matter how much a spirit world expert's strength fell, it was impossible for him to fall to the level of an ordinary person. She still remembered the first time she met him. At that time, he was a completely ordinary person. The length, color, and the feeling it gave. It was inexplicably familiar. Was it Ting Yu's spear? What was going on? Almost as soon as the silver spear appeared, her attention was completely focused on the spear in Ren Baqian's hand. The young man who was being pointed at by the silver spear couldn't believe his eyes when he saw this scene. He then thought of something, and his expression suddenly changed. Although few people had seen a spirit world expert who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon, almost all of them were famous figures. How could such a person appear here? Not to mention such a top expert, even an ordinary spirit world expert wasn't someone that the boat gang could resist. Senior, what do you want to ask? I don't know much. If you go directly to the headquarters, even the left guardian will answer all your questions. Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Ren Baqian flipped his palm and withdrew the silver spear. Of course, he could directly barge into the headquarters with his men and threaten the other party to bring him to where the gang leader was cultivating in seclusion. However, that would be too easy to alert the enemy. Up until now, he still didn't know if there were any of his men in the boat gang. He might as well kidnap someone first to understand the situation. I will ask and you will answer. If you are honest, I will spare your life. I don't have any malicious intentions toward the boat gang, but there are some things that I want to understand. Now, let me ask you, is your gang leader cultivating in seclusion? Where is he? How does he communicate with the outside world? How do you know that he is cultivating in seclusion? What happened before he went into seclusion? Who is in charge of the overall situation now? Ren Baqian opened his mouth and asked a series of questions. The gang leader is cultivating in a cave in the mountain behind the headquarters. He went in by himself, and nothing happened before he went in. Sometimes, he would send a voice from inside to get people to send things in. Every time, it is the left guardian who sends the things in. Now, the left guardian is in charge of the overall situation. The other party didn't dare to hide anything and quickly spat out everything he knew. You have two guardians, right? What are their names? What's the other guardian doing? The left guardian is Tang, and the right guardian is Bai Jia. I heard that they have been sent out by the gang leader to do something. Is the left guardian here? Yes. The gang leader is cultivating in seclusion, and the right guardian is out on some matters. The left guardian has been sitting in the headquarters. After getting the information he wanted, Ren Baqian nodded at Li Yuanzhu and asked, "Can you knock him out?" "I'm afraid that I won't be able to control my strength." "You should be more experienced in this matter." Ren Baqian really didn't know how much strength was needed to knock someone out, and it would be bad if he was beaten to death. He just needed to not be discovered before he met the gang leader. Li Yuanzhu was a little speechless after hearing this. What did he mean by more experienced? However, she still stretched out her finger and flicked the young man in the air. "Let's go to the back mountain." Along the way, Li Yuanzhu wanted to ask Ren Baqian about the heaven-grade weapon, but she didn't have the chance. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the back mountain, and she had no choice but to suppress her questions. It didn't take long for everyone to find a platform on the mountainside. There were two man-will experts guarding the platform. Without needing Ren Baqian to say anything, Li Yuanzhu flicked her finger and knocked them out. Everyone landed on the platform and didn't look around. They only saw two tall wooden doors embedded in a cave in front of them. If she wasn't mistaken, this was where the gang leader was cultivating in seclusion. Without hesitation, Ren Baqian stepped forward and kicked the wooden door. Bang! The entire wooden door shook. Renbochen's face suddenly lit up. It was colorful and exceptionally exciting. This wooden door was actually made of wood covered with iron plates. Damn it, I've kicked an iron plate this time. This thought came to Renbochen's mind, and the sharp pain in his toes made him gasp. Ha! Renbocchen breathed heavily as if this could alleviate the pain in his feet. Li Yuanzhu, who was beside him, felt like laughing for some reason. This scene was indeed too exciting. Chapter 938. The doctor probably felt that I had damaged his reputation by causing such a small wound. He was a little anxious and strictly forbade me from sitting down to work at night. In addition, my work and rest schedule also affected the healing of the wound. I might as well take a day off last night. Today, I will get a bed and table and lie on the bed to write my novel. The pretty boy of the Empress's family took a day off yesterday. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 939. The black mud ointment for external injuries and the ointment for bone fracture were the two miraculous medicines that must be brought out whenever one went out. Regardless of whether it was for a vacation or to silence a witness, who would not be killed by someone else. At this time, the value of this godly medicine was revealed. Renbochen sat at the side, took off his boots, and carefully applied the ointment. Lin Yu, who was standing at the side, seemed to have thought of something. She went up and kicked the wooden door. Boom! Ah, it's really made of iron. Lin Yu confirmed her suspicions with a limp. She took off her embroidered shoes and revealed her white feet. As expected, her toes were visibly red and swollen. He's not in the right mind, and neither are you. Can't you just use a kick? Lin Chaola said resentfully. Renbocchen, how could he endure Lin Chaola's words? Li Yuanzhu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lin Yu had never been like this before. He heard the noise coming from the foot of the mountain. The noise just now had already spread down, and he reckoned that someone would come up very soon. She went forward and pushed the door with both hands, but it didn't budge. It seemed like a simple push, but Li Yuanzhu used a lot of strength. Even though the door was made of pure iron, it was still sent flying by her push. The door of the boat gang's seclusion place was indeed very sturdy. Not only was the door made of fine steel, but some rare metals had also been added to it. That was indeed the case. Not only was the door made of fine steel, even the stone walls on both sides were made of fine steel. Not only was this cave a place for seclusion, but it also served as an escape route. When Renbocchen first built this mountain villa, he considered that if he encountered an enemy that he couldn't defend against, this door could at least hold off an ordinary spirit wool expert for 10 minutes. A cyan bamboo sword appeared in her palm out of thin air. She pointed it forward without making too much noise, but countless cracks spread from the center of the bamboo sword to the surroundings. Soon after, the entire door suddenly collapsed. The door that the boat gang had placed their hopes on was smashed by this simple and ordinary touch. It's empty, Li Yuanzhu said after taking a glance. As expected, it's empty. Renbocchen wasn't surprised at all. In fact, when he heard that many sex experts were in seclusion, he had already thought of this possibility. There were only 3 possibilities for the whereabouts of these experts. Either they pretended to be in closed-door training, or they were forced into closed-door training, or they were already dead and the closed-door training was just a facade. This time, he only came to confirm what kind of person it was. In fact, after that kick, there was no reaction from inside, so he knew it was empty. Since it was empty, the person who knew the whereabouts of the boat gang leader was the left protector. Was he pretending to be in seclusion, hiding his identity to do other things, or was he already dead? Before anyone came up, Renbochin took advantage of the light to take a look inside. The cave wasn't very big, and there were 3 stone rooms inside. One of them was piled with some food, while the other 2 were empty. "Who's there?" The person who came was very fast. Before Renbochin could finish looking around, he heard a voice coming from outside. But the last word sounded like a rooster being grabbed by the neck. Renbochin hurriedly walked out. When he was near the door, his gaze suddenly froze. He moved closer to the door and took a closer look. He had some kind of conjecture. He stretched out his hand and pushed outwards. The undamaged half of the door was pushed open. Renbochin looked at Li Yuanzhu, who was standing outside, with a pained expression. The door opens outward. Li Yuanzhu was speechless. It wasn't locked. It opened with a pull. Li Yuanzhu, she still tried hard to maintain the indifferent attitude of an expert, but the corners of her mouth twitched a little. After all, she had done something stupid. Renbochin mourned for his foot for a minute before looking up ahead. There wasn't 1 person, but 3. At this moment, they were all lying on the ground. Enchanting was stepping on one of them with 1 foot and holding another in her hand. In addition, there were also people running up the mountain. "Who's the left protector, Zhuolingtang?" Renbochin asked with a smile. "Enchanting, let him go." Cough, cough. "Who are you? How's our gang leader?" The person who was being held by Enchanting touched his throat with a look of lingering fear. However, he suppressed his fear when he saw the broken door. "Do you all like to ask questions?" Renbochin smiled, and the spear appeared in his hand again. This was much more persuasive than words. Sure enough, the other party's expression immediately changed, and he trembled with fear. He wasn't this afraid when Enchanting stepped on the 3 of them and rubbed them on the ground. However, it was different now that he knew that the person in front of him was a spirit will expert who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. "Who's Zhuolingtang?" The man immediately looked at the other man lying on the ground. The other man had already stood up, leaving only this person lying motionlessly on the ground. Renbochin's expression changed slightly, and he asked Enchanting, "Did you trample him to death?" "I didn't use any force." Everyone's expression changed, and they went forward to check on the man. His face was green, his lips were black, and there was black blood and white foam in his mouth. Renbochin checked his breathing and found that he was dead. "Left protector." The other 2 people shouted. "He committed suicide by taking poison." Renbochin frowned. He reckoned that the poison had been hidden in his mouth all along. However, this person was really decisive to commit suicide immediately upon seeing that the situation wasn't looking good. What exactly was the identity of this left protector? The manipulator behind the scenes has such strong control. This person was walking at the back, so I thought he was a lackey. Enchanting added, explaining why she stepped on him. She also knew what Renbochin wanted to investigate this time, but the first person he investigated committed suicide by taking poison. She felt somewhat apologetic. "Forget it. If I didn't know that they would do this, it would indeed be difficult to guard against them. I will have experience next time." Renbochin didn't care too much. Although he was already dead, it also verified one thing. There was a big problem with these experts going into seclusion. Furthermore, there was indeed someone from the other party in the boat gang, and he was one of the 2 protectors under the chief. It wasn't only the boat gang, but also the other sections. "Everyone, what exactly happened?" the man who spoke earlier asked in a pleading tone. After all, the boat gang didn't have the strength to question the people in front of them. "Your chief isn't inside. It's empty. As for his whereabouts, I'm afraid only Zhuolingtang knows." "You have seen the rest," Renbochin said faintly. "Are you looking for our chief?" "We just want to verify some things. Now, we have achieved half of our goal." Renbochin couldn't be bothered to explain too much, and the other party didn't need to know too much. It was already kind of him to explain this. Let's go. Renbochin turned and left in the direction where there were no torches. He wasn't afraid of encountering any conflicts with the boat gang, but there was no need to kill more people. This time, he came out to save people, not to kill. More importantly, his heart was heavy at the moment, and he was even in pain. Damn it, that door actually opened outward. Please remember the domain name of this book. Com, Wonderful Bookhouse mobile version website. Com. Chapter 940. Let's wait and see. Perhaps someone will come out and release a messenger bird or something. Renbochin circled around and returned to the outside of the manor. Compared to checking them one by one, following the vines to the melon was obviously a better method. Exange, go to the east side of the manor, Renbochin said. Her Majesty asked me to follow you. Exange was expressionless. He sighed, cupped his hands at her, and said, "Thank you for your trouble." She chuckled and disappeared into the darkness in a flash. After she left, he turned to look at the people around him. They were all very good fighters, but unfortunately, none of them were useful. One of them clearly stated that he was here to monitor him, one of them might sleep for 100 years after he was released, and the last one had a bad brain. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Lin Yu moved closer to him and asked weakly. "Ask away. Why did you kick the door just now?" Lin Yu felt pity for her toes. "My toes are swollen." Renbochin looked at Lin Yu and then at the sky. How should he answer this question? Say that he had a screw loose. Let's not talk about why I kicked the door. Why did you kick the door? Lin Yu waited for a long time, but there was no answer. She persistently asked, "Why?" Renbochin turned his head and looked at her. He didn't expect her to be so persistent this time. He thought for a while and said, to test a conjecture. Renbochin originally wanted to wait for her to ask before telling her that punching a wall would hurt. This was the reaction of force. He didn't expect her to respond with an "oh," and continue to be deep in thought at the side. Renbochin felt as if he had punched cotton. He was depressed and sullen. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have thought about it. Everyone waited until the sky brightened, but they still didn't receive the pigeons that they had expected. There was no point in waiting any longer, so they might as well take the time to visit the other sections. "How did you get that heaven-grade weapon?" Along the way, Li Yuanzhu finally had the chance to ask the question that she had been thinking about all night. Renbochin's face darkened. This is probably what it means to be gifted. Although I haven't reached the spirit will level yet, I have already condensed a heaven-grade weapon. As he spoke, an iron chain shot out from his body like a snake and coiled around her body a few times. Coincidentally, it was at the top of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain respectively. But it was useless. The prerequisite was that there must be a mountain. Li Yuanzhu's expression changed slightly, and she was a little embarrassed. She didn't pay much attention to the metal chain when it came, but the position where it wrapped around her made her very concerned. She looked at him with a profound gaze. "Sorry, I'm not very familiar with it yet," Renbochin said awkwardly. He had only given the order to keep the other party occupied. He really did not choose this position, and he would not take advantage of an airport. A heaven-grade weapon is condensed by the owner's spirit and is like an extension of the owner's limbs. What the heaven-grade weapon senses is what the owner feels. There was a hint of coldness in her words. "Although I'm not Qi Zixiao, I don't mind breaking my limbs." "I didn't. I picked this up. Where did I get this thing? Condensing a divine weapon? How could this be? Also, have you ever seen anyone condense two divine weapons? Not to mention that I'm only an earth will expert." Renboccian immediately changed his words. This was the first time he had heard of this. You picked it up. Li Yuanzhu's face was full of indecipherable meaning. I picked it up, I really picked it up. Renboccian nodded repeatedly. He really wasn't taking advantage of her. Xanja. What are you doing? What did you write in the book? After wasting a long time, Renboccian was still explaining that he picked up this heaven-grade weapon. As for whether she believed him or not, it was obvious from her expression that she didn't. However, Renboccian himself couldn't explain it clearly. After all, he wasn't prepared to tell her about Earth. Besides, she couldn't figure out why he had two heaven-grade weapons and could only continue to be puzzled. Yun Nation, Heyun District, Misty Rain House. Very few of these sects were located in the cities. Most of them were located in famous mountains and rivers, or even in the wilderness. This was the case with the Misty Rain House. The ancestors of the Misty Rain House used to be famous. At its peak, there were 7 spirit will experts in the sect, and they were considered to be famous. However, only the chief of the sect was a spirit will expert. Even so, the Misty Rain House was still quite famous. The most important thing was that all the disciples in the Misty Rain House were female, and each of them had a slim figure. It was as if they were shrouded in mist, making it hard for people to see them clearly. Although they were clearly standing there and there was no fog around them, it gave off such an illusion. As the ancient said, those who wore clothes were more beautiful than those who weren't. The disciples of the Misty Rain House were the opposite. Even if they weren't wearing clothes, they wouldn't disappoint you at all. Therefore, the female disciples of the Misty Rain House had always been the targets of many young heroes and rich young masters. Early in the morning, a drawn-out voice broke through the thin morning mist that shrouded the Misty Rain House. Su Ning, Guardian Su, please come out. No noise outside the Misty Rain House. Who's there? Figures shot out like lightning, and one by one, the graceful ladies landed outside the Misty Rain House. Renboccian glanced around with his hands behind his back. Although the Misty Rain House only had one spirit will expert, there were a lot of earth will experts. There were also many high-level man will disciples. Their foundation was indeed much deeper than those small sects. The disciples were indeed not bad. Their looks were also not bad. They were clearly standing there for everyone to see, but there was always a sense of mystery that was shrouded in mist. The Misty Rain House was indeed worthy of its name. More than 20 people jumped out with angry looks on their faces. They were obviously angry that someone actually dared to make a ruckus outside the Misty Rain House. Who are you? You're really bold to actually make a ruckus outside the Misty Rain House and even ask Guardian Su to come and see you. Who are you? Have you sent a visitation card? Is this person's head smeared with oil? Who's that Taoist nun? She's so beautiful. She looks so fierce. She doesn't seem like a good person. The ancients once said that a woman was equivalent to 500 ducks. Faced with 10,000 ducks, Renboccian immediately felt uncomfortable and immediately understood what his Baihu meant when he said that this place was more noisy. Zhao Prince Consort of Dao is here. Su Ning, come out and pay your respects. Renboccian said with a sullen face. This was already the 10th day since they left the boat gang. Renboccian and his group had gone to 17 sects at top speed. Other than the boat gang and the life and death sect that they went to on the first day, the people who contacted the other sects had either disappeared or committed suicide. They didn't see anyone alive. Renboccian knew that the other party already knew that he was here to investigate this matter, so he didn't hide it anymore. Where did this madman come from? What Zhao? Before he could finish his sentence, he was covered up by someone. Is he Zhao Prince Consort of Dao? He looks so handsome. His forehead is so shiny. He's indeed not an ordinary person. Zhao Prince Consort has arrived. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Finally, someone came out to take charge of the situation. It was a rather charming woman in her 30s. She was thick in places where she should be thick and thin. To put it simply, she had a bucket-like figure. However, her expression was refreshing, and her voice was full of energy. She wasn't annoying at all. The people in the Misty Rain house are all little girls who are ignorant of worldly affairs and didn't know that you were here. Please be magnanimous and don't blame us. The person laughed. Are you Su Ning? Ren Baqian sized her up. I'm Aniru. Guardian Su should have come out to greet you, but she has been seriously ill these days. If you want to see her, you can only meet her at the door. But, please forgive me for not recognizing you. Can you prove your identity? Aniru bowed and apologized with a smile on her face. The silver spear in Ren Baqian's hand appeared out of thin air and then disappeared without a trace. This thing was more useful than any proof of identity. An expert who had condensed a spirit wheel and a heaven-grade weapon was well known in this world, so he naturally wouldn't lie. As for whether the rumored Zhao Prince Consort had such strength, no one dared to doubt it. Sure enough, Aniru's gaze froze. She then bowed and said, I was rash. Zhao Prince Consort, please come in. She waved to both sides, and everyone dispersed. After Ren Baqian followed her into the Misty Rain house, she probed, May I know why Zhao Prince Consort is looking for Sister Su? Where's your chief? Ren Baqian asked. She's in seclusion in a secret chamber and can't be disturbed. I'm afraid we can only wait for her to come out of seclusion before she can meet Zhao Prince Consort to apologize in person. Ren Baqian nodded. He didn't ask to meet the chief since the final outcome would be the same anyway. It was more important to meet Su Ning first. Wasn't Su Ning fine a few days ago? Why did she suddenly fall ill? Ren Baqian asked faintly. In fact, Guardian Su has been ill for a long time, but her condition suddenly worsened recently. Guardian Su, please explain the specifics. Aniru led Ren Baqian and the others for more than 10 minutes. There were many courtyards and embroidery buildings on both sides, and it was filled with the smell of women. From time to time, they could see beautiful young girls bowing to them from afar. In particular, there was a woman with picturesque features, a slim figure, and extremely attractive. She bowed to them from afar, got up with a smile on her face, and her eyes were sparkling. This is the most outstanding disciple of the next generation in the Misty Rain house. Her name is Yuan Qingyi. After hearing about what you did for the captive camp, she has always been very grateful to you. Someone must have told her about it, so she specially came out to meet you. Aniru chuckled. Oh. Ren Baqian glanced at her. She was indeed excellent, especially with the mixture of immaturity and shyness on her body. Any man would be attracted to her. Unfortunately, Xianzhe was with him. Xianzhe, what are you doing? What are you writing in the book? The group walked a few rounds and came to a courtyard. Aniru said, Guardian Su looks a little scary when she's sick. You must be mentally prepared. Ren Baqian nodded. Aniru stood outside a small building and said, Guardian Su is on the second floor. This way, please. As soon as Ren Baqian lifted his foot, Aniru stopped the people behind him and said, Very well. Guardian Su's illness is only transmitted to women and not to men. If you want to go in, you must make some preparations. Ren Baqian was a little curious. What kind of illness was only transmitted to women and not to men? He stepped over the threshold and walked a few steps inside. The first floor of the building was full of paintings, especially the woman in red in the painting. Ren Baqian couldn't take his eyes off her. Although the woman was just standing there, she gave off the vibe of a towering mountain and was cold. Renbochin recognized her at a glance. That was obviously the Empress. Why was the Empress's painting here? Why was there a painting of the Empress here? The people outside saw Renbochin standing there looking at the painting, but they didn't care. They were about to take the veil that Aniru handed over to cover their faces when something unexpected happened. Aniru suddenly exploded without warning, and the sky was filled with a rain of blood. Everyone subconsciously hid. Then, a few loud noises and the ground trembled came from the small building. Everyone took a closer look and saw that the door of the small building was blocked by a 6-inch thick, pitch-black iron plate, or rather, a piece of iron, that had fallen from the top of the door. Oh no, there's danger. Li Yuanzhu dodged and pointed her sword forward. At this moment, a terrifying sword energy shot out from outside the wall, forcing her to turn around to save herself. Lin Chaola, who was the fastest, had already crashed into the window next to her. Boom! The iron plate wasn't a single piece. The entire interior of the small building was surrounded by the iron plate. Renbochin was inside, and everyone else was outside. Xange's face changed drastically, and her skin began to turn red as if blood was about to drip from the surface of her skin. Her aura rose steadily as she punched the iron block inside the door, each punch stronger than the previous one. After 3 punches, the 6-inch thick iron block was directly smashed into pieces and exploded. However, there was no one in the room. Let's set a small goal first. Chapter 941. Li Yuanzhu stood with her sword in her right hand and looked at the big hole in the courtyard wall. Her eyes became extremely dark like an abyss that seemed to be able to swallow people and the world. Su Wuming. The sword energy just now was so amazing that she had no choice but to turn over and protect herself. Among the famous experts in the world, only one person could use this sword energy, Su Wuming, who had been in hiding for a long time. Moreover, she had heard a little about Su Wuming from Renbochin. Sigh, you don't know what you are doing. The person outside the courtyard wall didn't reveal himself and only let out a long sigh. It's you who doesn't know what you are doing. Li Yuanzhu traversed more than 30 meters in an instant, leaving a faint line behind her. When she pointed with her sword, the air, flowers, and courtyard wall in front of her suddenly disappeared as if an invisible beast had bitten them off. Ding! A sword ray suddenly appeared in front of her, as if it was creating something out of nothing. In other words, it tore through space and appeared in front of Li Yuanzhu. The 2 swords collided and made a soft sound. Li Yuanzhu tapped her feet and retreated several meters. There were abnormal fluctuations in the air. The air on one side of Li Yuanzhu seemed to have encountered an invisible black hole and was sucked toward a certain point. Even the air began to distort. On the other side, the sound of cloth tearing could be heard, and one could vaguely see abnormal cracks in the air. Both sides were in a stalemate for a moment when a certain point in the air suddenly exploded. A gust of wind swept through, and soil flew everywhere. However, a cold sword ray tore through everything and went straight for Li Yuanzhu's face. Ding! 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 Li Yuanzhu's expression changed slightly. She pointed her sword 3 times in a row and retreated from one end of the courtyard to the other before the sword ray dissipated. However, the aura on the other end of the courtyard wall had already gone far away. Li Yuanzhu frowned and rushed into the house, only to see that the ground had been turned upside down. Even the ground was made of fine steel, but there was a hole in one place. Xange and Lin Chaola had already jumped down. Lin Yu was still standing there eating melon seeds and obviously hadn't recovered yet. Follow me, Li Yuanzhu said before jumping down. Lin Yu touched her head, looked upstairs, and then at her feet. She pondered for a moment before jumping down. It would take a long time to describe, but everything happened in an instant. It was about 20 meters underground. She jumped down and saw Axianjia and Lin Chaola. There were 6 paths in front of them, or it could be said that the bottom of the house was just one of the nodes of these paths. Which direction? Axianjia's face was gloomy. Her fist was bleeding profusely, but it was as if she didn't feel anything. Lin Chaola sniffled and sniffled again. Finally, she lay on the ground and sniffled. She raised her head with a puzzled expression. There's no smell of that guy. But the most recent smell is heading in that direction. Without saying a word, Axianjia chased after the passageway that Lin Chaola had pointed out. After chasing for an hour, the group saw a ray of light ahead of them, and the sound of water followed. Rushing out, they found themselves beside a waterfall. Where should we go? Axianjia asked again. The smell is gone. It seems to have stopped here. Axianjia's face was filled with doubt. Water. Li Yuanzhu was the first to react. Lin Yu followed behind the 3 of them, deep in thought. What are they going to do? Prince Xiao was still upstairs. At this moment, Ren Baqin was smiling, but it was a bitter smile. He heard Li Yuanzhu shout, Su Wuming. He also heard Axianjia smashing the metal plate downstairs. He also knew that everyone had jumped into a hole in the ground. However, he didn't dare to say a word. Everyone was simply too fast. Before he could think of a way to spread the news that he was here, they had already disappeared. The other party had used some unknown method to conceal their auras, and even Li Yuanzhu didn't realize that they were upstairs. Everyone subconsciously thought that they had been caught and escaped through the tunnel. Brother, you are still quite obedient. A charming and seductive voice rang in Ren Baqian's ear. The face that was next to his slowly moved away, and the jade-like hand that was stuck on his neck was slowly released. The hand was beautiful. It was as if it was carved out of white jade. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a jade-like hand. If this was the most beautiful hand in the world, Ren Baqian would consider it and nod in agreement. The fingernails on the hand were also very long, at least 2 centimeters long. There weren't any flaws at all, and it was obvious that the owner took great care of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do this. Although Ren Baqian didn't see it, he could imagine that there wouldn't be a speck of dust on such long fingernails. With such a beautiful hand and flawless fingernails, the owner must be very beautiful as well. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Ren Baqian had to admit that he always met beautiful women. For example, the Empress, Li Yuanzhu, Lin Yu, Axianjia, and the crossdresser. However, the woman in front of him was still breathtakingly beautiful. Purple eyeshadow was still very rare in this world. She had loose bangs, red lips that were like flames, a pair of phoenix eyes that were somewhat similar to the Empress's, and there was a mole at the corner of her eye. All of these combined to form a woman that made Ren Baqian feel breathtakingly beautiful. Most importantly, she was protruding forward and concave back. Just now, Ren Baqian felt that he had dribbled the ball into someone. He had to say that it was a good ball. However, Ren Baqian felt that the most breathtakingly beautiful thing wasn't the beauty of this woman, but the smell of her pink fingernails. It was a sweet and intoxicating smell. He didn't need to think to know that it was poisonous, and it was extremely poisonous. He didn't know if the other party would have died if he had made any strange moves just now, but he was definitely going to die. At this moment, she pulled her face away and looked at Ren Baqian with a smile. Hello, big sister. Ren Baqian looked as obedient and well-behaved as a harmless young man could be. Unfortunately, he forgot that he had a fierce face, a bald head, and no eyebrows. Inexplicably, he thought of the time when he first met the Empress. It seemed like he had to survive in a desperate situation again. It's been a long time since someone called me big sister. The woman touched her face and sighed. Slap. Ren Baqian was stunned by the sudden slap. A wave of anger rose from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, and a fierce look flashed in his eyes. However, he calmed down in the blink of an eye. He swung his hand and slapped himself. The woman opened her small mouth slightly and was obviously a little surprised. Just now, both sides weren't very symmetrical. This looks better. Ren Baqin smiled. Pfft, the woman smiled and looked at him with interest as if she was re-examining him. Then, she turned around in front of Ren Baqin and asked, "Am I beautiful?" "Who said that you aren't beautiful?" "You must be blind." "I'm not blind." Ren Baqin replied honestly. "Therefore, I can't say that you aren't beautiful." "Then, between me and Qi Zixiao, who is more beautiful?" The woman's eyes were full of expectation as if she was a young girl waiting for her sweetheart to praise her. However, Ren Baqin knew that this person in front of him wasn't easy to deal with. In fact, apart from Lin Yu, whose brain circuit was like the Mariana Trench, and Lin Chaola, who could increase her cultivation level in her sleep, no one who could cultivate to this level was easy to deal with. Furthermore, this was a fatal question. "I know of a mirror. As long as you ask it, Magic Mirror, who is the most beautiful person in the world, it will tell you." Ren Baqin said. "I think it will definitely tell you that you are the most beautiful person in the world." "Do you mean that I'm more beautiful than Qi Zixiao?" The woman's eyes were slightly sarcastic. "I mean, if someone else were to ask it, it would say the same thing. Otherwise, it would have been smashed long ago." Ren Baqin spread his hands. Slap. As soon as he finished speaking, Ren Baqin received another slap. The woman first slapped him, then gently stroked his cheek as if she was caressing her lover's cheek. "Does it hurt?" Ren Baqin gritted his teeth. This woman was simply a crazy knife. He then smiled and said, "I don't think I lost out. I think all the men in the world are willing to take this slap. It's good that you're not angry." The woman smiled happily. "You are so obedient that I can't bear to hit you." Chapter 942. Although the woman said this, Ren Baqin knew that he wouldn't die for the time being. Otherwise, he would have died just now. Since the other party didn't kill him immediately, it meant that there was something on him that she wanted. The problem was how important the thing she wanted was to her. Otherwise, she could still kill him at any time. Ren Baqin wasn't too worried about this since he had too many things in his mind. The next problem was, how could he survive and find a way to escape from his opponent? He had to do it within 4 days. This was because he would be returning to Earth in 4 days. Think about it. If he suddenly disappeared, the other party would be confused. If he suddenly appeared and saw the other party's face, he would be confused. Overall, Ren Baqin analyzed the situation and realized that there was good news and bad news. The good news was that he had found the person behind the scenes. The bad news was, he was caught by the other party. In any case, he had found the person behind the scenes, right? At least he found some clues. Half of the purpose of coming here was accomplished. The other half was how to go back alive and turn around to find a big treasure. If something went wrong, the Empress would really become a widow. Ren Baqin thought about it and smiled. The more this was the time, the more he had to smile. "How should I address you, big sister?" As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a stinging pain on his face. "Aren't you going to ask why I hit you?" The woman smiled brightly. "A woman like you can be forgiven no matter what you do. Since I have to forgive you, why ask?" Ren Baqin's face was burning, but his expression didn't change at all. He was smiling as brightly as the other party. At this point, he was completely in the zone. He had thrown aside his identity and the pampered life he had been living for the past few years. Now, He just wanted to survive and find a chance to escape. As for revenge, that was something to be done after he escaped. I'm starting to understand why Qi Zixia likes you, the woman suddenly said. Ren Baqin smiled and didn't say anything. I've seen a lot of shameless people, and I've also seen a lot of two-faced people, but it's really rare to see someone like you, the woman said faintly. As for my name, it's fine to tell you so that you can die without knowing. Yun Yuhan. I don't think anyone knows this name. Ren Baqin was moved. No one knew this name. In other words, he wasn't on the expert ranking. Was it because the other party had used a pseudonym, or was there some other reason? There was no need for Yun Yuhan to give him a fake name at a time like this. Yun Yuhan should be his real name. Why? Su Wuming was there, but this person wasn't. It had always been a mystery who created the ranking of the world experts. It was only known that it would appear every year. And this organization was also a mystery. Are these two the same organization? The other party created Su Wuming as a face to walk the world and hid the others. Why were these experts willing to do this? They hid their identities just to prevent people like him, who wanted to leave the banished land, from appearing. For the sake of his own life, Ren Baqian's brain was working at high speed. He was able to analyze so much from just one sentence from her. You don't seem to be afraid. Do you think they can come back and save you? The woman looked at Ren Baqian's expression and smiled. If that was possible, you and I wouldn't be here now, Ren Baqian said calmly. You're a smart person. It's a pity that you only look smart but do stupid things. The woman shook her head slightly. She grabbed Ren Baqian by the neck, broke the window, and ran into the distance. They made a few turns along the way, ran along the river for more than 5 kilometers, and returned to land. After another hour, they arrived at a small manor. Strong winds blew all the way, and their speed wasn't much slower than the Empress's. Ren Baqian estimated that it took them 5.5 hours to travel at a speed of about 350 kilometers per hour, which was more than 1,600 kilometers. Including the detours along the way, the straight-line distance was more than 800 kilometers. The direction was probably to the north, near the border with Great Xia. At this distance, Li Yuanzhu and the others definitely wouldn't be able to find him. Ren Baqian began to worry. If he was imprisoned in this place, he would really be done for. He would definitely be discovered going back and forth to Earth. Even if he used words to fool them, it could only be done once, twice, or thrice. Perhaps they would be brought to Earth by him. That would be really troublesome. What kind of people were in this manor? How long would he be imprisoned? How would they treat him after finding out his secret? Ren Baqian went through all of these in his mind. All the options were passive, and his life was in the hands of others. Not only was his life in their hands, but what about the Empress? If they really made a move, would the Empress be a match for them? At the thought of this, the sense of crisis in Ren Baqian's heart intensified. He had to find a way to change this situation. When Yun Yuhan landed in the courtyard, people immediately greeted her from afar. They were all young men in their 30s or 40s, and they seemed to be very respectful to her. Seeing this scene, Ren Baqian suddenly had an idea. She was a woman, and a very powerful one at that. She was a woman with a high status. He only had one active way to turn defeat into victory, and that was to woo her. This idea suddenly came to Ren Baqian's mind. Just because I'm so handsome. Ren Baqian thought about it and felt that the most important thing for a person was still talent. He couldn't always rely on his looks to make a living. Yun Yuhan threw him into a side room and said with a smile, "Stay here for now. Don't even think about escaping. With your strength, you won't be able to escape. The treatment is better than I thought." Ren Baqian looked around. He then looked at Yun Yuhan and asked, "How are you going to treat me next?" What do you want to know from me? Let me say this first, don't think about torturing me. I'm afraid of pain. You can consider seducing me. Maybe I'll confess. Yun Yuhan smiled as she watched Renbachian's performance. She moved closer to Renbachian and directly rammed him with the ball. Two soft mounds on her chest and a delicate fragrance assailed his nostrils. How do you want to seduce you? Her soft words directly blew into Renbachian's ears with hot air. Renbachian deliberately took a step back and said, "First, tell me what you want since you didn't kill me and brought me here." Yun Yuhan followed closely behind and gently blew into his ear. "Now that there's no one to disturb us, you and I have time to talk." Seeing that she was sticking close to him, Renbachian made up his mind and lowered his head slightly. A man and a woman alone in a room. Why don't we do something more meaningful? What do you want to do? Yun Yuhan asked with a cold look in her eyes. For example, dance. To be able to dance with a woman like you, I wouldn't trade it even if I became an immortal. Renbachian reached out to grab Yun Yuhan's hands. Her movements were a little unnatural, and Renbachian noticed it. He immediately knew that she was a paper tiger. However, she wanted to see what tricks he was playing, so she let him grab her hands. "Oh. You wouldn't trade it even if you became an immortal?" Yun Yuhan said in a charming voice full of ridicule. "What's there to die for? I'm willing to be a mandarin duck and not envy immortals. Mandarin ducks are really enviable. Don't you see me when I come and go? I hate embroidery of a lone one on the curtain so that I can paste a pair of swallows on the door curtain. Swallows fly around the painted beam, and the curtain is covered with tulips. Patches of clouds touch the hair of cicadas, and the slender moon turns yellow." As Renbachian spoke, he put one hand on his waist and the other on his shoulder. He recited a part of Chang, an ancient meaning, without the beginning and end, hummed a canon, and led her to dance in the center of the room. Yun Yuhan's eyes flickered, and she suddenly stopped smiling. She let Renbachian lead her to dance like a puppet. It had to be said that she was much better at learning than the Empress. After stepping on Renbachian a few times, she knew what to do. Renbachian and the Empress had danced to the same song a few times, but at that time, he felt sweet in his heart. At this time, he was holding a soft body, but his heart was freezing cold. Both of them were smiling, but they were holding a knife in their hearts. The only difference was that Renbachian had what she wanted, and this was what he was relying on. Other than that, everything was in her hands. On the other hand, the other party treated him like a monkey in her palm and was very interested in enjoying the novel experience that he brought. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 943. After the dance, Yun Yuhan took a step back and slapped him in the face. "Stay here. Someone will come and ask you." After saying this, Yun Yuhan left the room. Renbachian touched his cheek and felt a burning pain. His eyes were full of fierceness like a ferocious tiger, but he restrained it after a while. He had just come up with this idea and immediately made such a choice just for an opportunity. It might not necessarily be useful, and he didn't need the other party to have a good impression of him. As long as the other party hesitated at the critical moment, it would be enough. In times of survival like this, every opportunity had to be grasped. Perhaps one could save his life. Although this wasn't the only opportunity. Renbachian always felt that he was more talented in this area. Of course, the premise was that the other party wasn't the kind of person who had seen countless men. If that was the case, Renbachian reckoned that he would be swallowed whole. He had never felt that he was smarter than the people of this world. Except for the aboriginals. Fortunately, some of the details just now made him realize that the other party was just a paper tiger, which was good news. Yun Yuhan said that someone would come, but he didn't know who it would be. Could it be Su Wuming? How many people were there in this organization? What kind of organizational structure was it? What was Su Wuming's position in it? What about Yun Yuhan? If he took the initiative to surrender, he didn't know if he would have more opportunities. He would disappear every 7 days, and this couldn't be changed. He wouldn't be able to keep up the pretense of civility for long. Would the Empress be very worried about his disappearance? He was afraid that she would go straight to the Yun Nation from Lon City, and probably do something extreme. He was still careless. While he was looking for the other party had already prepared a trap and was waiting for him to crash into it. However, the change was so fast that he and the others were caught off guard. Even if they were more careful, as long as he was still investigating this matter, it would be inevitable. Renbocchen thought about it, then found a place to close his eyes and rest while waiting for someone to come. After about half an hour, Renbocchen felt something strange around him. He opened his eyes and saw a scholar with a long beard sitting on a chair not far away, looking at him with a smile. Another spirit will expert, Renbocchen thought. To be able to appear in front of him without him noticing, this person was undoubtedly a spirit will expert. Renbocchen nodded politely and asked, "How should I address you?" "Wen Shaoxing." The scholar smiled. Renbocchen thought for a while and realized that he hadn't seen this name on the list of experts before. It was another person who wasn't on the list. "What is your purpose?" "Pretty much what you're thinking. Warriors of love and peace. Work hard for world peace." Renbocchen asked with a smile. The other party's smile froze for a moment. As a person who thought highly of himself, it was inevitable for his heart to waver when he was evaluated in such a manner. Then, he smiled. It was not the kind of smile that seemed to be fixed on his face, but the kind that seemed to have thought of something interesting. He nodded slowly. "You can say that. You have a divine weapon?" With a flip of his palm, a silver-white spear appeared in front of him. When Shaoxing looked at it carefully, and an unknown light flashed in his eyes. It's 6 feet and 3 inches long, gold and silver in color, and there are patterns of the listening rain flower on the spear body. It is indeed Tingyu's listening rain spear. Renbochen's gaze froze. Even he didn't know what the pattern on the spear was, but the other party actually recognized it at a glance. With such a good understanding of Tingyu's spear, Renbocchen increasingly suspected that the other party was the same group of people who made the list of experts. "I'm very curious as to why Tingyu's divine weapon didn't dissipate and instead fell into your hands. I heard that before Tingyu died," he shouted, "Where's my spear?" in a voice filled with grief and indignation. "It seems that this listening rain spear fell into your hands before he died." Renbochen's eyes flickered. The other party even knew about this matter. At that time, in addition to the aboriginals, there were some experts from the Jing tribe, and there seemed to be some commoners. The other party might have gotten the news from them. "Are you really doing this for the survival of the human race?" Renbocchen asked instead of answering. "That's right. You really do know. Nothing is more important than the survival of the entire race. This is righteousness. Unfortunately, there are always some people who like to do stupid things and bring the entire race to the brink of destruction." When Shaoxing looked at Renbocchen with regret. "So, you kill the future of the human race time and time again?" Renbocchen asked with slight sarcasm. He wanted to disturb the other party's state of mind and make them doubt whether everything they did was right. At that time, he would have a better chance. The future. If that future is the destruction of the entire human race. You are too arrogant. You don't know what you are facing. This isn't the only group of humans. Renbocchen said with a faint smile, his eyes full of mockery. When Shaoxing suddenly froze and tensed up like a creature whose tail had been stepped on. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he asked, "What did you say?" I said that the human race isn't limited to this group of people from the land of exile. 2 groups of humans escaped back then, and the other group is at the other end of the sea. Renbochin said calmly. After listening to Renbochin's words, Wen Shaoxing suddenly laughed and asked, "Do you know what is in the sea? If it weren't for your last sentence, I would have been really scared by you. It's nothing more than storms and beasts." Renbochin was actually relying on guessing, but when it came to the sea, he only knew about these things. Do you know about submarines? Do you know about ironclad ships? Do you know about satellite navigation? Do you know about Yamato warships? Do you know about SOD? Renbochin threw out a bunch of words that the other party couldn't understand before saying calmly, "You're just a group of people with limited vision and thinking. You hide in your own world and live in fear. You think that you are doing this for the entire human race, but in fact, you are just pitiful people who are afraid of everything." His expression was arrogant, as if the person in front of him wasn't a spirit world expert who could easily crush him, but a dog that could be seen everywhere. The other party didn't care about his expression and just stared blankly at Renbochin as if he was shocked by his series of words that he didn't understand. That's right. I'm a pioneer who came from that land. In fact, it's not just me. We have sent dozens of people out over the years, and each time, we split up and went in different directions to search for One Piece. You are just an unexpected gain for me. We have done far more than you can imagine. We can communicate with each other over long distances, and each of us can know what is happening in our land at any time. We have weapons that can destroy the world. We have eliminated the Zerg and the Protoss, and our next goal is to recapture our homeland. When I set foot on this land and found you, who share the same bloodline as us, I was shocked by your backwardness. You haven't developed for thousands of years and are even weaker than before." Renbochin's face was full of pride, deeply proud of the land he was on. "It's really hard to imagine that as humans, you have fallen so far." Renbochin shook his head slightly, and his eyes were full of resentment. "What makes it even harder for me to imagine is that in this land, there is actually a group of people like you who think that they are righteous, but have actually become a cancer." As for Wen Shaoxing, his face was full of confusion. Chapter 944. Wen Shaoxing's eyes flickered. Renbochin's words had a great impact on his worldview. Renbochin's gaze made him feel like he was a fool. Nonsense. Wen Shaoxing used all his strength to open his mouth and spit out 4 words. A bunch of nonsense. Renbochin was arrogant and looked at Wen Shaoxing as if he was looking at a lousy person. He said, "You're all a bunch of losers." Although Wen Shaoxing did not know what this word meant, he could imagine that it was not something good. The world has changed. Can't you see it? Can't you see the war between Dayo and Great Xia and the Yun Nation? Can't you see those weapons that have never appeared before? Why were Dayo's troop movements, joint attacks, and pincer attacks so accurate? Why is Dayo's army able to be commanded so easily? Are you guys blind? Of course, those things may be beyond your imagination. I can only say that your imagination can't keep up with reality. Renbochin's face was full of pity. Wen Shaoxing only felt a stuffiness in his chest, making him almost unable to breathe. He was indeed studying the changes in Dayo's army. However, Renbochin's words were like a hot knife stabbing into his chest. He couldn't even imagine what others could do. How sorrowful was this? Lawn City has become a city that never sleeps. I'm sure all of you have heard about the chandeliers that cover the entire city. Don't you know anything about the forging factories built all over the Chuyun mine? These are only the most superficial techniques. However, if you want to develop them on your own, with your state of not making any progress for thousands of years, I'm afraid it will take hundreds or even thousands of years. Those glasses, mirrors, these little things that I took out casually, yet you can't even do them. What face do you have to question me? Nonsense. I think you are the ones who are ignorant. In my opinion, you are a group of primitive people surrounding a leaf. Do you know what primitive means? It was the state of eating raw meat and drinking blood before humans could use flames. You faced an enemy of the past and thought that you could not defeat it, so you begged for your lives. However, we have already reached a point that you could not even imagine. At this moment, Rinpoche was in the zone again. He was either proud, regretful, pitiful, or disdainful. He had created the image of a visitor from an advanced civilization and was looking down on the natives who were just eating and waiting to die. Puff! With Rinpoche's reprimand, Wen Shaoxing's face alternated between green and white. Finally, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was deathly pale as he staggered out the door. Vomiting blood. Does this person have a fragile heart? Rinpoche touched his bald head. He was obviously surprised by the power of his words. However, his sudden inspiration was not bad. No matter who was behind the other party, they would not easily make a move on him. Even if there was a hidden foreign race behind them, they would definitely find a way to find out the location and strength of the country he made up. If they were really just a bunch of brainless humans, it would be even easier to deal with them. Playing the role of a visitor from a highly civilized country that had developed for thousands of years was much more effective than playing the role of a snake or scorpion. In any case, he had so many things in his hands. Rinpoche touched his body. The grenades and sugar bags that were originally in his pocket had all been shaken off when Yun Yuhan grabbed them. After all, his reputation as a poison warrior was quite intimidating. However, it didn't matter. There were too many things that he could prove. Back then, he had always been afraid of letting others know that he was a visitor from a foreign land. Unexpectedly, he now had to work hard to make people believe that he was a visitor from a foreign land. Next, it would depend on the effect of the 10 million word outline that he had just boasted. Not long after, Rinpoche felt his vision darken. A person appeared in front of him and stared at him. It was Yun Yuhan. What did you do to Wen Shaoxing? There was no anger in Yun Yuhan's eyes, but deep doubt. I just told him some big truths. Rinpoche spread his hands. Do you want to hear it? Not interested. As for you, your life is in my hands now. You are a smart person, so you'd better behave. Yun Yuhan said slowly. Her voice was very charming and soft, but there was a chill in it. Don't worry. I'll wait for you to send me back. Rinpoche chuckled. Pow! If you die, I will send your head back and bury it with Qi Zixiao. Luo Qiu shouted. Yun Yuhan laughed. Rinpoche's smile didn't change. There was a flame burning in his heart that wanted to burn the person in front of him to ashes. It's still too early to shout about killing. I'm curious about something. Have you ever tasted a man? Do you want me to try? Han's finger moved along Rinpoche's cheek, neck, and finally reached Rinpoche's shoulder blade. Following which, Rinpoche felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulder blade. His opponent's finger had forcefully pierced into the lower part of his shoulder blade. The yang boosting technique had strengthened his skin, but this finger only caused him to exert a little more strength. After piercing a knuckle, Yun Yuhan pulled her finger out, put her face close to his shoulder blade, and gently licked his wound with her tongue. Rinpoche seemed to not feel the pain and smiled even more brilliantly. Do you know that there is a saying in our world called thorny roses? Roses are the most beautiful flowers, but they have thorns. If you want to pick a rose, you will always be pricked until you bleed. Thorny roses. Very interesting. Yun Yuhan licked the blood from Rinpoche's wound. The corner of her mouth was stained with some blood, and she looked even more coquettish. After Yun Yuhan left, Renbachien walked to the mirror and looked at himself. There was a hole in his clothes, and inside the hole was a wound as thick as a finger. After Yun Yuhan licked it, the wound actually stopped bleeding. However, Renbachien was a little worried that he wasn't poisoned. Yun Yuhan's fingernails were all highly toxic. Perhaps this was the reason why she licked it. Was her saliva detoxifying him? Or did she have the antidote in her mouth? He had to admit that this woman was simply crazy. If he had the chance, he would kill her first. In the evening, when Shaoxing appeared in front of Renbachien again. His face was still a little pale, but it seemed that he was fine. Seeing the wound on Renbachien's body, when Shaoxing frowned and then smiled at him. This kind of thing won't happen again. Renbachien playfully asked, "Is your status higher than hers?" When Shaoxing shook his head. "You will know this in the future. I can only tell you that this kind of thing won't happen again. I would like to hear you continue to talk about that continent." In fact, when Shaoxing was already 30% convinced. After all, some things could be seen. Judging from some of the aspects that Renbachien had shown, Renbachien was indeed not from the Yun nation, Great Xia, or the Qin nation. In that case, what he said was very likely true. Although Renbachien was exaggerating, when Shaoxing felt that it didn't seem like a lie. Renbachien smiled and sat there, telling him how the human race arrived on the continent of Valoran, gained a foothold on the coast of Dalmatia, fought for the next piece of land from the natives, defeated Galen, the goddess of Dalmatia, Lux, and finally unified the entire continent of Valoran. After that, the human race also developed rapidly. While they were exploring the surrounding waters, they encountered the Zerg and the Protoss, who called themselves the Protoss, and a war broke out between the three parties. In the end, the human race used nuclear weapons to destroy the Protoss Templars and won the war. However, after that, the human race discovered that the Protoss race was a race that had been driven out of One Piece, which contained a huge secret of this world. Therefore, the entire human race began the age of discovery and searched for the legendary One Piece. Looking at Wen Shaoxing, who was listening attentively, Renbachien felt that he was really a web novelist who had been delayed. What you see is only a small part of this world. Renbachien stretched out his pinky and gestured. After Renbachien finished speaking, Wen Shaoxing was in a daze. What Renbachien said was too exaggerated. However, it was too real. The Protoss Templars, Dark Templars, Dragon Knights, Consul, Marauders, Observers, the Zerg Zerglings, Hydralisks, King Zergs, Lurkers, Wyverns, Queen Zergs. Renbachien's description of the abilities and appearances of these things that he had never heard of before was too realistic. It was as if they existed in this world. The human race had really encountered such enemies before. Otherwise, there was no way to create two such realistic races in such a short period of time. Not to mention the natives of the continent of Valoran. If he hadn't experienced it himself, it would have been hard for Wen Shaoxing to believe that someone could weave such a truthful lie in such a short period of time. In his heart, the truthfulness of Renbachien's words had risen from 30% to 70%. Let me set a small goal first. Carrot remembers in Bei. Chapter 945. Wen Shaoxing sat there for a long time without saying a word. His expression was very interesting. In the end, he left without saying a word. He went back to reorganize the incredible things he had heard today. In his heart, there was also a little yearning. There was another group of humans in the past. To this extent. Compared to them, they should really be ashamed. He just couldn't figure it out. They were all humans, so what kind of fortuitous encounters did they have? How did they reach their current level? That night, Renbachien slept well. After realizing that his life was not in danger for the time being, he let go of his worries. The only thing that worried him was the Empress. He had to find a way to contact her, however, when Xiaoxing hardly fell asleep. He spent the whole night thinking about the things that Renbaqian had described, and images formed in his mind. The next morning, Renbaqian was moved again. This time, not only Yun Yuhan but also Wen Xiaoxing left with him. In this stronghold, the two of them should be the ones with the highest positions. Wen Xiaoxing originally had other things to do, but what Renbaqian said was so important that it would even affect the future direction of their organization. As such, their original plans had to be temporarily postponed. Before he set off, he probed, "Send someone to inform Qi Zixiao that I'm fine." Although it was a probing question, his tone was unquestionable. After all, this was befitting of his current identity. A strange smile appeared on Yun Yuhan's face. She gently stroked Renbaqian's face with her fingers. It was cold to the touch, but it was charming and gentle to the touch. Ahem. When Xiaoxing gave a dry cough and glanced at Yuhan. Yuhan curled her lips and retracted her hand. "It's not up to me to decide how to treat you." The meaning was obvious. If you can't even keep your life in the end, then there's no point in informing Qi Zixiao. If you can really move the others, then we'll talk about informing Qi Zixiao. Maybe we don't even need to inform Qi Zixiao and we can just let you go. Renbaqian smiled mockingly and asked, "Do you have any other choice? Curl up here and be a maggot for the rest of your life." When Xiaoxing's eyes darkened and he stopped talking, Yun Yuhan glanced at Renbaqian with a strange look. She was now curious about what Renbaqian had said to Wen Xiaoxing last night that made Renbaqian dare to speak in such a tone and Wen Xiaoxing's reaction. This journey took a full day, and they still relied on their feet. The speed of a spirit will expert was far faster than that of an ordinary mount. However, their speed was slower than before because Wen Xiaoxing was slower than Yun Yuhan, who was carrying Renbaqian. The direction was northeast. Renbaqian had a bad feeling about this. If they headed northeast, they would be at the seaside. If it was by the sea, it would still be fine. However, if it was on a small island in the East Sea of Great Xia, no one would be able to respond to his cries. He did not dare to place all his hopes on convincing the other party. From morning to night, it took them almost 14 hours to travel more than 1,600 li. They finally arrived at a fishing village by the sea. He wondered if the organization behind the scenes in this world had the same aesthetic standards and liked to stay in the village. For example, when they were in Tianjing Basin, or now. The fishing village was not small, and from the looks of it, there were at least a few hundred families. In this era, it was considered a very big village. At this time, a population of 10,000 was considered a medium-sized city. Towns generally only had a population of 2,000. The ground in the village was paved with bluestone, and there were tall trees full of white flowers planted around it. In particular, there was a tree at the head of the village that was nearly 30 meters tall. Its branches and leaves were lush, and its spreading shade covered the 7 or 8 houses around it. There were many pedestrians coming and going in the village. There were children running and jumping barefoot on the bluestone road, and there were also fishermen wearing coarse clothes and dragging fishing nets whose skin had turned black and red from the sun. When they saw Wen Xiaoxing and Yun Yuhan, everyone saluted them from afar. Renbaqian observed carefully and found that 35% of the people he saw along the way were ordinary people, 50% were man-will experts, and half were earth-will experts. The ratio could be said to be astonishing. However, after thinking about it, this was the lair of an organization, so it was very normal. In addition, there were blacksmiths, grocery stores, cloth shops, and tea houses in the village. It could be said that this was a shrunken town. Renbaqian was locked up in a courtyard in the west of the village. Yun Yuhan remained here to guard him while Wen Xiaoxing left in a hurry. In a village, an old woman and 2 old men sat above. The old woman sat in the main seat, and the other two sat below her to her right. Wen Shaoxing respectfully told the three of them what Rinpoche had said to him. Following Wen Shaoxing's words, the two old men's faces were full of bewilderment. In fact, Wen Shaoxing's retelling wasn't as complete as Rinpoche's, so the effect was much worse. "This is ridiculous." One of the old men couldn't help but reprimand him. "It's indeed ridiculous." A cold light flashed in the old woman's eyes. "I'm a little interested." The last old man showed a strange smile. "If what he said is true, then a lot of things can be explained. Hall Master, two deputy Hall Masters, I feel that his words are trustworthy. That's why I brought him back to the hall." There are some things in Dayo that really can't be explained, especially the weapons that appeared in the war against Great Xia and Tianjing Basin, which we have never seen before. After that, we collected some fragments and did find a problem. Those things don't have any traces of being handmade. Also, the long-distance communication that he mentioned should also exist. We didn't think of it before, but now, combined with what he said, the precise mobilization and cooperation of the Dayo army in these wars can be explained. "What do you mean by bringing him back?" the old woman asked with a cold face. "Summon all the deputy chiefs and above to decide our future." Wen Shaoxing lowered his head and said respectfully, "How dare you? Who do you think you are, Wen Shaoxing?" The old man who reprimanded him earlier shouted angrily. "Of course, I'm a member of the Temple of Heaven. I don't think there's anything wrong with this proposal. If what he said is true, then we are really frogs in a well, and everything we have done has become a joke. Grand Master, do you think those nonsense dream talk are true?" the old woman asked with a cold face. "Maybe it's true, maybe it's false. Either way, this is a big deal. If what he said is true, then it won't just affect us, but the entire human race. Have the two of you forgotten what the purpose of the Temple of Heaven is? Such an important matter, of course, must be decided by everyone. To be honest, I hope that what he said is true, but I don't know why the two of you have such a big reaction." The old man who was called Chief smiled. "I just think that it's complete nonsense and not credible. It's ridiculous to put aside all other matters and summon all the deputy chiefs just for this nonsense." The old man who reprimanded him earlier said resentfully. "What if what he said is true? What if he can produce evidence? That kid is full of doubts, so it's better not to make a decision too quickly," Chief said with a smile. The momentum of the other two suddenly stagnated. "Why don't we gather all the honored ones first and decide whether to summon all the deputy chiefs back immediately? This matter involves the future of the entire human race. Since ancient times, the Temple of Heaven has been watching the changes in the world with cold eyes. What we do is to protect the human race. This is a righteous cause. In other words, the Temple of Heaven is not a temple for one person or one sect, but for everyone. Now that something that can affect the future of the entire human race has appeared, it's natural for everyone to make a decision together," Chief repeated. The old woman stared at him a few times and let out a long sigh. "You're right. This matter needs to be decided by everyone. Ring the heavenly bell and summon all the honored ones to discuss together. Old friend, set a small goal first." Chapter 946. Rinpoche was resting in the house, wondering how he could find an opportunity to contact the Empress. At this moment, he heard the sound of a bell coming from the center of the village. Yun Yuhan, who was leaning against the door, changed her expression slightly. "It's the 12th ring. All the venerables are coming out of seclusion. They actually value you so much." Rinpoche opened his eyes and smiled. "Yesterday, I asked you if you wanted to know what I said to Wen Shaoxing. It's too late for you to know now." Yun Yuhan walked over to Rinpoche and said, "How can it be too late? Unless you don't want to say. Renbochin stroked her face with his finger. I really don't have any interest in talking about it now. Yun Yuhan's arm moved and then stopped. Her palm stopped a few centimeters away from Renbochin's face, and he could feel the wind from her palm. Don't be so impatient. It won't look good if your face is swollen. Renbochin smiled and pushed her hand away. Humph. Yun Yuhan twisted her body and walked back to lean against the door frame. Renbochin didn't know what Wen Shaoxing said to her, but it did have some effect. 2 hours later, Wen Shaoxing returned and said, Come with me. The temple chief and the venerables want to see you. Renbochin nodded, tidied up his clothes, got up, and walked out with Wen Shaoxing. The speed of the other party was unexpectedly fast, which showed that they valued him a lot. This gave him a lot of confidence. What's the name of your organization? Renbochin asked casually on the way. Temple of Heaven. Probably because there was no need to hide his identity now, Wen Shaoxing spoke frankly. What are venerables? The abdicated temple chief will become venerables. Renbochin nodded. Temple chief, venerables, temple chief. It seemed that the other party did have a lot of experts. Are you a temple chief? Yes. During the 10-minute journey, Renbochin got a lot of information from Wen Shaoxing. It seemed that Wen Shaoxing no longer hid anything after arriving at their lair. This organization was called the Temple of Heaven. It was said that a group of people formed it after the human race retreated here. Its purpose was to protect the human race. However, some things happened later. Some people discovered that not only did the human race not recover their strength, but they were also constantly weakening. From then on, the Temple of Heaven knew that if there were no major changes, the human race wouldn't be able to leave the land of exile. From then on, the Temple of Heaven had another task, which was to ensure that no one left the land of exile. The Temple of Heaven was divided into 8 subhalls, with about 10,000 people. The other party didn't mention the number of venerables, but Su Wuming was one of them. The so-called Temple of Heaven was not above ground, but underground. There was a sea god temple at the back of the village. From the back of the sea god temple, there was a passage that led diagonally down a few hundred steps. Then, there was a passage lined with oil lamps on both sides. After walking for a few hundred meters, they finally arrived at a huge space. Dozens of tall statues were situated in this space, forming a circle. Each statue was 10 meters tall. They were either holding a book, a long sword, or a spear. Each statue was like a fierce warrior who fought against the heavens and earth, inspiring respect. Renbochin counted silently. There were a total of 42 statues. 17 of the statues had a person sitting on their shoulders. There were both men and women, and almost all of them were elderly. These people were the venerables and deputy temple masters of the Temple of Heaven. In other words, there were at least 14 venerables in the Temple of Heaven. He wondered if Su Wuming was among them. When Shaoxing brought Renbochin to the center of the hall, bowed to the statues in front of him, and said, Temple Master, Deputy Temple Master, Venerables, I have brought him here. Go back to your seat. The voice of an old woman was heard. When Shaoxing moved, landed on one of the shoulders, and sat down cross-legged. Renbochin looked at the tall statues in front of him. If he wanted to see everyone clearly, he had to look up. He then lowered his eyelids and chuckled. Everyone, this isn't the way to treat a guest. I don't have the habit of looking up at others. Kid, what did you say? An old man asked. His voice was like a big bell that reverberated in this space, causing pain in the eardrums. There was also a kind of power that made people fearful. If it were someone else, they might really be in awe. However, Renbochin had been through the market of Dao's imperial court and was immune to this kind of situation. In Dao's imperial court, there were 2 things that needed to be done to suppress others. The louder the voice and the bigger the fist. Renbocchen remained unmoved and said, "You need to maintain a minimum level of respect for a guest from another group of humans, a civilization that far surpasses yours, and a person who can bring you a future. You think that you control my life, but I control your future." Renbocchen wasn't moved at all. As soon as he said this, the atmosphere in the hall immediately changed, and many of the venerables looked surprised. In fact, many people still didn't know what was going on. The bell rang 12 times, indicating that something important had happened and that everyone needed to make a decision together. This kind of thing was rare in the history of the Tiandao Alliance. The last time it happened was 100 years ago, when a group of warriors who were preparing to leave the land of exile were killed. Li Fu only knew that Su Wuming had killed a group of people. In fact, there were also venerables who went to eliminate the experts in other places. "You are very bold," the old woman said. "It's just a reasonable request." Renbocchen laughed and then raised his voice. "Everyone, let me reintroduce myself. I'm Zhao, Prince Consort of Dayo. Of course, this is only a part of me. In addition, I'm a descendant of another group of humans who left the Lansang region. I'm a member of the League of Legends and the captain of the One Piece exploration team, Nico Robin. I need treatment that matches my identity." The air suddenly froze as Renbocchen spoke. The dozen or so venerables were shocked. With their cultivation and status, as well as their many years of experience, it could be said that nothing could make them lose their composure. However, after hearing Renbochen's words, everyone couldn't keep calm. "What did you say?" It wasn't one person who spoke, but several people who questioned him at the same time. Renbocchen spread out his hands and asked, "Do you still want me to look up and talk to you? The 42 statues here are the 42 seniors who founded the Temple of Heaven back then." A gentle voice said. "So, it didn't stop you from stepping on them? Or do you want to come down?" Renbocchen smiled kindly. "How dare you!" An aura came pressing down from the sky like a mountain trying to suppress Renbocchen. Renbocchen smiled and wasn't moved at all. Another aura came from the sky and protected Renbocchen. "Ning Yujiang, this isn't in line with how we treat our guests." "What kind of guest is he?" "He's just a kid full of nonsense." "Whether I'm full of nonsense or not isn't something you can decide alone." "Humph." Renbocchen said at the right time, "Whether I'm talking nonsense or not. There will always be a way to prove it. Don't you even have the courage to face it? Or are some of you afraid of something?" "Ridiculous." Ning Yujiang. After the old lady stopped Ning Yujiang, she slowly said, "Each of these 42 statues represents an ancestor who founded the Temple of Heaven. The reason why we are standing here is that each of us has inherited the will of an ancestor. However, as you said, you are a very important guest. If what you said is proven to be true, then you naturally deserve to be treated with courtesy. If what you said is proven to be false, you definitely won't be able to bear our anger. Now, I'll give you a choice. Do you still want to be treated in accordance with your status? I can tell you that if you are honest now, it's not too late." Renbocchen sneered in his heart. "Child's play. If I show my cowardice now, doesn't that mean that my words can't be trusted?" He immediately opened his mouth to speak, but at this moment, there was a slight tingling in the back of his head as if he had been bitten by something. Renbocchen opened his mouth, and his expression suddenly changed because he realized that he couldn't make a sound. The old lady in the distance looked at him mockingly. However, it was only for a moment before Renbocchen spoke again. "I want treatment in accordance with my status." The old lady's expression immediately changed. How was this possible? Did the soul worm fail? One had to know that the soul worm could transform between real and fake, enter the sea of knowledge of others, and control their consciousness. It was an extremely precious thing in the world. It didn't exist in this land of exile at all. Out of the 3 that were left behind, only 1 remained after so many years. This was an important matter, so she took it out to use, but it actually failed. At this moment, on a planet in Renbachian's Sea of Knowledge, a thumb-sized worm streaked across the sky like a gray line. Looking at the ocean, mountains, plains, forests, rivers. The worm's eyes were filled with confusion. Where is this? Is this the sea of knowledge of a human? How can it be so big? Where is the pearl? I'm lost. Set a small goal first, such as, remember in 1 second, Shook Ju Mobile. Chapter 947. Choking with Sobs. Novel. The old woman thought that she could control him, but she didn't expect that she would fail. This made her a little absent-minded. Because she was too confident in the soul worm, she did not prepare any backup plans. On the other hand, Renbachian didn't know that he had escaped a calamity. After realizing that he was fine, he relaxed. I demand treatment befitting of my status. Renbachian looked straight ahead and said faintly. He didn't look at anyone and just calmly scanned the setups in his line of sight. He didn't want to raise his head to look at others. Although he didn't have such a taboo and didn't have such an arrogant ego, he needed it at this moment. Give him a spot. The old woman came back to her senses. Her expression was unsightly, but she still had to control herself so that others wouldn't notice anything unusual. She looked around the hall and realized that it was too late to arrange a seat for Renbachian. As such, she could only use the statues in the hall. The deputy hall master of the Birdine Hall is dead. You can speak from there. Renbachian turned his head and looked around. When Xiaoxing pointed to the side and said, "Here." It was at the outermost part of the hall. If the 46 statues were said to have a higher status as they moved inwards, then when Xiaoxing's and Renbachian's statues were located on both sides of the door. They were also the 2 statues with the lowest status. However, the height was the same. Renbachian climbed up the statue with his legs and arms. He exerted quite a bit of strength under his feet. This statue was indeed very sturdy. He didn't even manage to step on a single piece of gravel. Are you the chief of Kain Temple? Renbachian asked Wen Xiaoxing. Yes. Wen Xiaoxing closed his eyes and responded lightly. Wen Xiaoxing was the chief of Kain Temple and had appeared in the Yun Nation. It seemed like Kain Temple was in charge of a part of the Yun Nation. As for the Vice Hall Master, he didn't know if he died at the hands of Vice Protector General Wu Kai or the 2 commandants. However, this was as far as he could go. He hadn't protected himself yet, so it wasn't time to dig up the past. Renbachian looked up at the people in front of him and started to taunt them. I am shocked by your depravity and incompetence. The moment he said that, the others were instantly enraged. As members of the Heavenly Law Union's upper echelons, when had they ever been ridiculed like this? A powerful aura lingered in the sky above the hole. It was as if a huge wave would crash down at any time, smashing Renbachian's body into pieces. Let me reintroduce myself. I come from another branch of the human race. It was an accident that allowed me to discover you. Renbachian ignored the auras and continued speaking. The aura in the air suddenly stagnated. You came from another human race. What proof do you have? Where is the other branch of the human race? How did you get here? How many people do you have? For the crowd, they could put aside their previous disrespect and even pretend that they didn't hear it. These were the things they desperately wanted to know. Of course there is evidence. In fact, you can already guess a thing or two from the new weapons that appeared during the war between Dayo, Great Xia, and Tianjing Basin. There's also Dayo's long-distance communication technology. Without the need for carrier pigeons, they can speak from thousands of kilometers away. Not to mention, there were also steam cars, forging machines, and other new production processes. But it seems like you guys are very ill-informed. Or as I said before, weakness and ignorance have limited your imagination. Renbotchen continued to mock them mercilessly. Of course, it's actually very easy for you to see the evidence. Unfortunately, when I stepped into the trap, your people threw away all the things I had on me. Otherwise, I would be able to prove it now. In the end, you still can't prove it, someone said in a deep voice. No. You don't know what quantum transmission is. In fact, you don't even know what quantum is. However, this technology isn't perfect at the moment, and it takes some time for a round trip. That's why I'm talking to you first. I don't know what you're talking about, but you have to prove that what you said is true first. There's another branch of the human race in this world, and you are also from there, the old woman in the center said with a cold look in her eyes. It seems like, you really want to prove that everything I said is false. Renbotchen asked with a faint smile. Logically speaking, as a member of the human race, you should feel happy and excited to hear this news, but your reaction seems a little strange. The old woman's face turned cold. After all, what you said is too unbelievable, and we have to be cautious. Being cautious doesn't mean denying it. Renbotchen said noncommittally. Everyone here can tell whether what I said is true or not, right? I always thought that being able to live to this age, you wouldn't be living like a dog. Even if you aren't smart, you can still tell whether a person's words are true or not. Furthermore, you will always have the opportunity to verify it. Did you lose anything before we verified the authenticity of the information? Renbotchen's words made everyone frown and their blood surge. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with what he said, but his words were really too unpleasant. They couldn't help but want to slap him to death. Renbotchen sneered in his heart. Sometimes, people were so cheap. The more polite you were, the more they felt that you had something to ask of them and the more untrustworthy you were. The more you despised them and trampled on them, the more they felt that your words were trustworthy. In particular, he had to play the role of these people. Back then, the human race retreated step by step, and you retreated to this land of exile. The foreign races also focused their attention on you. In addition to you, there was another group of people in hiding. There weren't many experts among them, so they didn't attract much attention. Everyone nodded. According to some of the information that had been passed down, the battle was very fierce. In a short period of time, both sides suffered great losses. The human race began to retreat, while the foreign races pressed in wave after wave. Under such circumstances, it was normal for some survivors to wander outside and not be noticed. Although the foreign races were powerful, they weren't large in number. After the foreign races chased the human race to the land of exile, they would return to deal with the survivors. Our ancestors also knew that what awaited them in the end was destruction. It just so happened that they weren't far from the sea, so they built some wooden boats and went out to sea to hide. They first arrived at some islands and stayed there for a few days to reinforce the hastily made boats. Then, they went all the way east. Along the way, they went through many hardships, fought against the heavens, and finally arrived at the chaotic star sea with a little bit of luck. Tens of thousands of people set out, but only half of them made it to the chaotic star sea. What kind of place is the chaotic star sea? Someone asked after listening to Renbotchen. The chaotic star sea is a place where humans and foreign races mix. In fact, some people arrived there long before that and left behind descendants, Renbotchen continued. With the help of a senior named Han Pao Pao in the chaotic star sea, many of our ancestors recuperated there for several years. However, as its name suggests, the chaotic star sea is too chaotic. There are many forces, and killing is common. During this period, someone accidentally obtained a sea map to the continent of Valoran. Finally, some people decided to set out again to find their legendary new home. Renbochin added, "This is the beginning of the rise of another branch of the human race." Rise? Everyone repeated this word. If what Renbochin said was true, then the number of humans who came to the land of exile was even smaller. Now that thousands of years had passed, had the human race in the land of exile risen? No. Although the population had increased by 10,000 times, the overall strength of the human race was probably inferior to the original tens of thousands of people. They really couldn't imagine what Renbochin meant by the rise. What was the current branch of the human race like? Only Wen Shaoxing was looking forward to it. After all, the feeling of being stabbed in the heart several times and beginning to doubt life couldn't be enjoyed by only himself. It was truly good for everyone. Furthermore, he really wanted to see their expressions in a while. Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 948. Novel. Yes, rise. Renbochin repeated. Do you know what's the biggest difference between us and you? Renbochin asked. Do you know what's the biggest difference between us and you? You're willing to hide in a corner and even bind yourselves for fear of bringing disaster upon yourselves. You even regard this as your responsibility and goal. Ridiculous. Let me ask you this, are you willing? Is this what you thought when you joined the Temple of Heaven? Is this what you wish for? For thousands of years, this has been the case for generations. Are you willing before you die? No. Although I don't know you, I can say that everyone wants to see the vast world outside. No one likes to be imprisoned in a cage. Enough. You don't understand our situation at all. This is the land of exile, and there's no hope of recovery here. Someone shouted angrily. Renbochin chuckled to himself. These words placed him outside the group of people from the land of exile. In other words, regardless of whether the other party had made a mistake, his attitude and interrogation had worked. This is the land of exile, but the outside world isn't. Renbochin said faintly. Since you're waiting to die of old age here, why don't you fight to the death and find another way to go overseas? You might have gained something after thousands of years. Do you think we haven't done it? Although I don't know how you passed through the turbulence layer, how many lives have we lost over the years? Oh. So you gave up. Renbochin's heart skipped a beat. The turbulence layer, as the name suggested, should be an ocean with a lot of turbulence. However, to be able to stop so many experts, there should be other reasons besides the turbulence. Do you think our survival fell from the sky? It's undeniable that luck did play a role in our arrival in the chaotic star sea. However, how many times have we passed since then? It was all achieved through the concerted efforts of everyone. When has the human race ever been strong? Whether it was in the Lonsang territory, the chaotic star sea, or even the Zerg and the Protoss, we were always at a disadvantage. The human race is a weak race. Renbochin announced loudly. Other races are born at the man-will level or even earth-will level. The entire race can communicate directly with each other through telepathy or maximize the use of allocated resources in exchange for the strength of the entire race. Even the most common vicious beast could learn to run within a month or two of birth, and could learn to hunt within half a year. Only the human race had a low starting point, slow growth, and weak talent. It could be said that they had nothing. Greed, jealousy, laziness, internal strife, and all sorts of other evil deeds are not lacking. Following Renbochin's words, some people were deep in thought while others looked angry. They had to admit that what Renbochin said was right. Even if he wanted to refute, he couldn't say anything. More importantly, Everyone wanted to hear what Rinpoche had to say. The smile on Rinpoche's face disappeared as he shouted at the top of his lungs, "So what? Now that the Zergs and the Protoss have fallen, the Valoran continent is under the rule of the entire human race. We explore the 4 seas, we conquer the skies, we soar in the sky, we defeat powerful opponents, we explore the most fundamental mysteries of this world. This is what the weakest of humans can do." After Rinpoche shouted, he paid attention to everyone's expressions and aura. He realized that it wasn't as infectious as he had imagined. It seemed like there wasn't enough foreshadowing. Rinpoche reflected on himself. There was no other way. He had never done such a thing in his life and needed to arouse the emotions of others. He had no experience. However, it was still not too late. Rinpoche took 2 deep breaths to calm himself down. "I hate the idea that all of you return everything to the land of exile and the turbulence. This is a form of cowardice and incompetence. You have to know that the world is there, and we can't let it change for us. We have to change everything." Then, he lowered his voice and continued, "When our ancestors arrived at the Valoran continent from the chaotic Star Sea, it wasn't a fertile land. There were aboriginals, foreign races, and disputes. The entire human race only had a little more than 10,000 people. Furthermore, there were no experts." Rinpoche emphasized. "Just like what I've said before, they're just a group of survivors who have been temporarily forgotten and thought to be irrelevant to the overall situation. There were no experts. The strongest among them was only at the earth will level. They were inferior to you." Everyone was surprised to hear this. No experts. How did they survive then? Putting everything else aside, just the huge beasts in the sea alone could easily destroy tens of thousands of people. However, the fact is that we survived. Rinpoche smiled. "Not only did we survive, but we also became stronger and stronger. Of course, we were like you at the beginning and hid in a corner. The first thing we had to do was to survive. While surviving, we constantly thought of ways to understand everything about that continent and adapt to its rules. The most important thing was war and technology. War made us fearless of bloodshed and united. War made us strong, made us progress, made us suffer, and sublimated our spirits. War and struggle are the most beautiful gestures of human beings. If war is a gesture, then technology is the foundation of everything. The development of technology has enriched our supplies. Technology allows us to become stronger without any strong individual strength. Cold weapons, firearms, explosives, cannons, tanks, fighter jets, bombers, warships, aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons. Rinpoche spoke quickly and kept throwing out nouns that no one had ever heard of. He didn't need to explain to everyone what these nouns meant. He just needed to make them feel that they didn't understand. "We are on a completely different path from you. We don't have experts or the strong, and we don't have the glory of the past. We have to rely on ourselves and these technologies to defeat powerful enemies." Rinpoche took a deep breath and began to tell everyone about the most important war that lasted for 100 years, the Battle of Summoner's Canyon. It praised the heroes who made outstanding contributions: Yingzheng, Bai Qi, Liu Bang, Xiang Yu, Wang Jian, Liu Bei, Cao Cao, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhang Shutuo, Su Xiling, Ko Zhong, Yuan Huoji, Shan Xiongxin. He also listed the heroes of the foreign races on the continent of Valoran. He also listed some key battles, such as the Battle of Hulao Pass and the Battle of Guandu. The former was basically the Qin dynasty, the Three Kingdoms, and the Sui and Tang dynasties. The Sui and Tang dynasties were even magically modified, the twin dragons of the Tang dynasty. Every name of these people is remembered by every descendant. They didn't have the strength of you. They might not be strong, but they all made outstanding contributions in that 100-year war. They were the first batch of achievers of the League of Legends. It was to commemorate the heroes in the war that the League of Legends was established. Renbochin didn't forget that he was a member of the League of Legends. He conveniently raised the level of the League of Legends by several levels. It was during that century-long war that our technology began to develop rapidly. New technologies and equipment began to appear, and the entire human race also underwent tremendous changes. Telephones, television, computers, numerically controlled machine tools, energy technology, material technology, biotechnology, information technology, and even breeding technology, agricultural technology, production technology, and new technologies were constantly being developed. Although the human race was at war, their strength was accumulating little by little. After that war, we spent hundreds of years to truly unify the continent of Valoran. After a period of settlement and development, we began to explore this world. At that time, we were already strong enough, until we met the Zerg and the Protoss. Leyland said. Renbochin took a deep breath and began to tell everyone about the second crucial battle in the development of the human race, the battle between the three races. It was also known as the battle for supremacy. At this point, the doubts in everyone's hearts decreased. It couldn't be helped since Renbochin's narration was too detailed. He could tell the details of every person and every war. The logic was complete, and there were almost no omissions. In fact, at this time, some omissions were normal. After all, no one could remember in such detail. The most important thing was that they couldn't find any loopholes in the narration of history. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 949. Compared to the foreign races of Valoran, the Zerg and the Protoss, who had different forms and abilities, as well as completely different life forms and social structures, were the real enemies. This was an arduous war that lasted for thousands of years. During the most tragic times, the blood of millions of soldiers stained the creep of the Zerg in a single battle. Everyone was shocked by this number. Following Renbochin's narration, everyone could imagine the tragedy of that war. Countless human warriors charged into the bunkers and the Arachnid base, which was guarded by the Earth spikes. Countless fighter jets took off to fight against the Zerg wyverns and queens, and countless sparks and blood bloomed in the air. At this time, everyone understood something. For example, firearms were like crossbows, but they were more powerful, had a longer range, and were easier and faster to control. For example, a tank seemed to be a vehicle completely wrapped in iron, and the most important thing was the cannon on top of the tank. For example, an airplane was a tool that could carry people, fly, and attack. If it weren't for Renbochin's narration, they wouldn't have imagined that such a thing existed in the world. Renbochin also described to them the huge enemy nation of the humans. With the improvement of medical standards, the birth rate of that batch of humans was higher, and their survival cycle was longer. With the development of technology and abundance of supplies, the number of members in a family was much higher than in Great Xia. Since they mainly controlled these weapons in battle, ordinary people could go into battle after training. As a result, even though there was a bloody war that lasted for thousands of years, they survived by quickly replenishing their population and training their combat power. In the end, by relying on the unified allocation of supplies and tenacity of the entire human race, they defeated the so-called Zerg and the Protoss with great difficulty, won the war between the three races, and became the final king. When Renbochin talked about how the humans had used nuclear bombs to blow up the last base of the Protoss and the remaining troops, everyone felt a surge of excitement in their hearts. They wanted to shout out loud and cheer for the blood-soaked achievements of these humans. Although they were the top combat power of the Temple of Heaven, although they were all used to seeing the wind and clouds, and although they all looked old and senile, they were once young and hot-blooded. After hearing about the deeds of the other branch of the human race, the blood in their hearts that had not yet disappeared was reignited. Good. Let's celebrate. Someone patted the statue under his seat and praised loudly. It was a burly man with a beard that resembled the scene of an explosion. At this moment, his eyes were turbid and filled with a sharpness that was stimulated. His face was full of praise. Even though his beard and hair were all white and his face was full of wrinkles, he had a tall stature and was only slightly smaller than the aboriginals. His back was straight like a spear and his voice was like a loud bell. It could be seen that this person used to be extraordinarily mighty. Of course, after this praise, Renbochin felt that he wasn't too bad either. He was keenly aware of the change in the atmosphere in the hall. When he saw the admiration in everyone's eyes, he knew that the time had come. Putting the latter part of the story aside, he said, "War, blood and fire, survival and death, evolution and elimination, these are the main themes of our race, and also the main themes of every race. Everyone is afraid of death, this is the instinct of life. But we do not resist death. Therefore, we are not averse to war. In this world, only by fighting could one obtain a slim chance of survival. If one remained stagnant and holed up in a corner of the world to seek perfection, what awaited them would ultimately be destruction. Look at you, don't you look like cattle and sheep in a pen? What's even more laughable is that you've become shepherds and raised yourselves in pens." Renbochin mercilessly pulled everyone back to reality. Those foreign races just feel that you are no longer a threat, so they will ignore you for the time being. If they remember one day, this place will become their playground. All of you, as well as your descendants, will become their toys. Toys that they can take as they please. You don't have the courage or the ability to resist. In fact, you will even become their accomplices. You want to say no. But isn't that what you are doing now? Now, you are using the survival of the human race as a reason to eliminate the foreign races. In the future, won't you use the survival of the human race as a reason to make people willingly become their puppets? You are their accomplices. Renbochin directly interrupted what the other party wanted to say and angrily rebuked them. However, you are lucky to have met me. You don't have to be like the people before you, living a life of self-confinement and self-degradation from birth to death. I will let you at least have a little hope in life. I will let you still have a chance to see the sky outside. I will let you still have the courage to muster what little courage you have left. I will let you have the courage to say loudly that you are a human. Enough. The old woman loudly interrupted Renbochin's words with a trembling voice. Renbochin was surprised to hear another feeling in her voice, fear. That's right, fear. What was she afraid of? Was she afraid of his words? Or was she afraid of something else? Renbochin paid attention. Just now, when everyone was excited, the old woman's expression was a little strange. Although she was too far away to see what her expression contained, it was different from the others. How can you prove that everything you say is true, and not nonsense? Prove this first, and then we will talk about other things. The old woman panted a few times and said. As soon as she said this, the hall quieted down again. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Renbochin. Most of them believed Renbochin's words. This was because there would always be various loopholes in a fabricated story. However, there weren't any in Renbochin's words. Renbochin's story was too detailed and too real. It was so real that everyone seemed to be able to see and touch it with their own eyes. They could feel that the entire human race was united as a rope and worked hard for the same goal. Each and every soldier was willing to sacrifice life and death for the same goal. There was only one word in everyone's heart, for humanity. The appeal of Renbochin's story was so strong that they couldn't imagine that what he said was false. Or rather, they didn't want to believe it. Just as Renbochin said, this was their chance. However, at this time, everyone was still silent and waiting to see Renbochin's proof. Some of them had their eyes flickering, and they made up their minds to protect him even if he couldn't produce proof now. Proof? Do you really think that you have captured me? Renbachien suddenly laughed. Initially, I just wanted to find the mastermind behind the scenes. Now, I just want to talk to you. I want you to understand that you are walking on the wrong path without knowing it. I have to say that I'm actually quite kind-hearted. Seeing that you humans have fallen so far. I'm still trying to save you. Now that you want to see the proof. Do you remember the quantum transmission technology that I mentioned before? This is one of the technologies that we obtained from the Protoss. First of all, you have to know what quantum is. Everything in the world is made up of tiny particles, from mountains to water droplets. They are all made up of countless tiny particles. Each of us is also made up of these tiny particles. Everyone nodded slightly. In fact, they had also realized what Renbachien said, but they couldn't express it as clearly as Renbachien did. These tiny particles are actually made up of even smaller particles. These particles are atoms, electrons, photons, and so on. Quantum is a general term for subatomic particles. Quantum transmission is the transmission of quantum particles from one point to another. Remember what I just said. We humans are also made up of tiny particles. You mean? Everyone pondered over Renbachien's words. Although they didn't understand the specifics, they understood the meaning behind his words. Everyone's faces were instantly filled with shock. This technology currently has a little flaw. After a transmission, it takes a few hours to recover before it can be transmitted again. Also, don't come close to me. I don't want to transmit a part of your body to another place. I don't think you want to try half of your body suddenly appearing on the other side of the world. Renbachien chuckled. As he spoke, the air around him fluctuated. Then, everyone watched helplessly as he disappeared just like that. No, he's not in the hall, someone said with a surprised look on his face. When Shaoxing bowed to everyone and rushed out of the hall. After 15 minutes, he came back with a shocked look on his face. Not even within a radius of 5 kilometers. He had always thought that Renbachien's life and death were under his control. Not only him, but everyone present felt the same way. However, at this time, everyone realized that Renbachien really just wanted to stay and say a few words, just as he said. Everyone in the hall fell silent, and their faces could no longer remain calm. Over the past 100 years, everyone's emotions had fluctuated as much as today. Sure enough, Renbachien came from the outside. What the other party had said was indeed true. Would he come back? He said that it will take a few hours to recover before he can be transmitted again. Everyone, wait here for a while. We should also discuss what to do in the future. The voice of a gentle old man came into everyone's ears. It was the deputy temple master, Zhongshang. Is there anything else to discuss? The tall man who had previously praised Zhongshang sneered. Chief, what do you say? Zhongshang didn't care at all and looked at the old woman with a smile. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.